Hello everyone, how are we all doing? Come on and sit on down. I have a another guest with me today, a repeat guest, the hijacker, host of The Most Important Things from Radio Revolution. And now he does a show every Wednesday or so, but he's kind of tapping out of the game a little bit these days and retiring from the truther realm, but he's still knocking about. And if you haven't checked out already, me and the hijacker have had a couple of conversations now about the millennial reign of Christ and all the intricate ins and outs of how that would actually look on the earth if it went down, and the geopolitical side of things. And I really enjoyed having the hijacker on to share his perspective. And we're going for round two today because in our last talk, which went on for 2 hours, which has over around 30,000 views now, we didn't even touch the surface of the mountain of notes and ideas that this guy has. So, hijacker, how are we doing? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're coming in great, Paul. Yeah, fantastic. Your audience is in for a treat, that's for sure. They're going to hear things they never heard before. And I don't normally do this, Paul, but I don't normally like read scripture or not into public prayers. At least if it's not with like a small group,
Mhm.
or like over the, you know, like a televangelist. Not into that stuff. But I did want to read you this one scripture because this sums up your your sort of niche or your crevice, so to speak,
Mm.
on the internet. And you and I both know that the really good stuff that we get, it's in these backwater cul-de-sacs of the internet. It's small channels. It's not the it's not the big megaphones like the Alex Jones and that type of thing. It's more or less smaller. So I just wanted to start off with this, and this is with Isaiah. Of course, he's running from Jezebel, and then the word of the Lord came to him, and basically says, "What's going on, Elijah?" And then he says, and they're trying to make a point here. Anyway, so the Lord says, "Go forth and stand upon the mount before the Lord, and behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind rent the mountains and brake in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the voice of the Lord was not in the wind, but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after a fire, a still small voice." And that's what your type of internet presence is. Not a huge channel, but it's a small, still voice. And then basically, then Isaiah comes out of the rocks, out of the cave, and then he has a conversation with the Lord. But the still small voice, and so that's what people are hearing when they're hearing your channel. Not hearing a megaphone, not a CNN, not that type of thing. So I just wanted to open it with that. Is that they're getting ready to hear, basically, one of the crevices of the internet, the still small voice, so to speak.
Oh well,
But
well, thank you.
so the premise of what we're going to be talking about, and this is my premise, that the crown jewel of God's creation is the millennial reign of Christ. Basically, that in 70 A.D., Christ set up a physical kingdom. Um, so this is if I have to term this conversation we're having, this is the Rosetta Stone of understanding Christ's millennial reign and the historical timelines. And I can start with a lot of places, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a word picture because I'm not going to cite off a whole bunch of scriptures. You know, this generation will not pass away unless these stones. I'm not going to go through all those. There's about 70 direct scriptures that actually talk about Christ's imminent return.
Hmm.
And then there's a couple hundred others that are indirect scriptures. Why these guys that write books, I could name names, but I won't. They're big names, even the alternative media. Why they don't understand, why they can't accept that Christ had come in 70 A.D. and then actually had a physical reign for 1,000 years. I don't know. But there's like 70 scriptures direct, and I forgot who did that. Kingdom Within, somebody like that. He listed them all. But there's a couple hundred that are indirect. So I'm going to give a word picture. And the word picture is with Rob Skiba. And so the late, great Rob Skiba, in which he had died. Some people think that, it was untimely. But anyways, Rob Skiba, he saw this clip, very famous clip you've seen, all your audience has seen. But it's this guy at Lake Superior, and he's looking at the skyline, the Chicago skyline across the lake, which is 59 miles. And this radio announcer on this main TV, he comes on and he says, what you're seeing is not a real picture. It's a mirage. He says, the skyline is mirage. You can't actually see the horizon of the Chicago skyline from here, being 59 miles away. Rob saw it. Rob got mad. He goes, well, I'm going to see about that. And so Rob took his own money. He chartered a boat. He picked what he thought would be a good window of opportunity. He went to the other side of Lake Superior with his camera. I think he brought his wife and maybe somebody else. And when he got to the boat dock, the captain, came up to him because they were going to take a boat ride from one side of the shore, 59 miles away, all the way to the city of Chicago. And the boat captain, he was really happy. And he goes, guess what? This is like one of only 3 or 4 or 5 days, I forgot what he said, in which you can actually see the Chicago skyline right now. And Rob says, really? He said, yeah, there it is. And so Rob, he's got in the boat, put on his Nike P1000, went across. They drove all the way across. Whole time, Rob's got the camera on the Chicago skyline till they get to the Chicago skyline. And Rob proved that it was no mirage. Also, according to the numbers of what we're told, according to the Ball Earth, there's no way you can see even the top of the Sears Tower, 1,600 miles. The point of the story is that when Rob was flying back, he was saying, he was still struggling with flat Earth. And he was saying, God, I see that and I just cannot. And then Rob said, God spoke to him. He says, if you're not going to believe my word, if ultimately it comes down to where here you got the physical evidence, but if you still can't believe it, this is right when Rob switched over and he goes, okay, I'm all in for flat Earth. And God says, if you can't believe the scriptures, then there's nothing more I can do for you. And so that's what I'm using as a basis, those 70 scriptures. But I've got something that I have never read an account. I have never heard a live testimony of what I'm about to tell you. And I've looked at all kinds of stories throughout history, but this is actually my personal testimony with 2 of my sons of the Aurora Borealis that happened May 10th, Friday night. This is what I saw. And everybody says, well, he's talking about the Northern Lights. Right. Everybody thinks that the Northern Lights, they come out of the North Pole. Iceland can see them, Finland, parts of Canada, Alaska, that type of thing. And so that's what they think. So there was supposed to be a geomagnetic 5 class storm that was supposed to come. And we were supposed to be able to see them here in Seattle. This is what I saw. At about 11:15, my son, who's watching for it, because he's kind of into the stars and stuff like that. And he's not a flat earther. He's in his 30s. He works for a high-tech company. He came in and he goes, it started. So what I did is I went out. Unbelievable what I saw. I walked out on my front porch. I looked directly up overhead. Now, I live 60 miles from Seattle, north, in the foothills of the Cascade Range of the Cascade Mountains. It's almost 11 o'clock at night. I walk up directly. When I look directly south, I can see the Arcturus, and this is the star that comes off the Big Dipper. Other words, you got the Big Dipper, and then you got the handle, and then if you go a little bit further from the handle, you got the star Arcturus. I am right underneath that, literally. When I turn and look north, right above the smokestack of my home is the pole star.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking up at Arcturus. This is what I saw. I saw from the star Arcturus all the way around, like a bicycle wheel, rays, bluish, greenish, purplish, emerald, orangish, reddish rays that went all out, rays that went from Arcturus all the way to the north, not from the north towards me, but from this star. I was underneath the star, and from the star, the rays went out 360 different, 360 degrees. It was the most glorious thing that I ever saw, but it gets even crazier, Paul. I mean, it was unbelievable. I'm looking. In fact, if anybody wants to actually hear, I actually got on Revolution Radio on Jimmy Jean's Friday night show that May 10th, and I called in my excitement of what I was seeing. Then what I saw, all of a sudden, it blinked like 4 or 5 times. That's just what I saw. My son said, "Look, it's blinking." I turned. It's like a light switch, on, off, on, off. So think about the northern lights right above me, right coming out of the star Arcturus, 360 degrees, rays, glorious rays coming out. And then it blinked like 4 or 5 times, but it gets better. So I'm looking, craning my neck straight up, right? And all of a sudden, I see a star-like UFO out of the corner of my eye start to move across the sky. I went, wow. And then I saw another one. And then one went partial, blinked off, kept on going, and then turned back on. And then my son says, "Dad, another one." It came all the way across the star Arcturus. I saw 17 star-like UFO type of lights moving all around the star Arcturus. And then I got the kicker right at the end. I'm looking at the star, directly at it. And from the star itself, I see a shooting star come out of Arcturus and come down to the earth. So I am completely, it's otherworldly. I don't think anybody has seen that. I even said to my son, who refuses to be a flat earther, I says, "Well, what do you say about that?" And he goes, "Well, maybe the geomagnetic storm, like it does that for everybody. Wherever you look up, everything goes out like that." In other words, the cognitive dissonance, you're just like, I can't explain it. I can't explain the UFOs, the blinking. Of course, I only saw the shooting star. He took pictures of it. I thought he was filming it, and he only got one really good picture of the spoked wheel, and we tried to load it on my computer, but couldn't. The reason why I'm telling you this story, not only is it like never heard before story in the history ever written that anybody's ever said this, that the Northern Lights actually came out of a star. But when you take a look at our biblical cosmology, what do you and I actually believe the stars are, Paul, according to the book of Enoch?
Well, I understand them to be angels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I am left with, did the Messiah, Yeshua, did he come for some reason right above my head and visit the star Arcturus? What does it mean? How could this have happened? What was this grand, glorious sight? And then the other question was, well, exactly how did NASA know that there was going to be a geomagnetic storm in which they said, oh, Seattle was just going to be affected? No, it was right above my head. Don't tell me that. I saw it. It went from south to east to west to over the horizon north towards the pole star.
Hmm.
And so then I got to thinking about my whole new epiphany, or my whole new revelation on the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And I thought, wait a minute. Not only did Jesus said that the stars of heaven would fall, but even in the book of Revelation, it says the stars of heaven, like a fig tree being shaken, they will fall to earth. And then I started thinking, did the angels actually, during the 1,000-year reign of Christ, all of the angels, like the Bible says, actually descend to earth? And so now we get into the 1,000-year reign of Christ. So anyways, think about that particular scripture about the stars actually falling.
Hmm.
And so I'm done with this set of notes. So let me go on to the next, because I'm ready for you.
Sure thing. I mean, that was a great story, by the way. Thanks for sharing. I mean, I've seen my own orb of light swimming through the night sky phenomena my entire life, so I can appreciate what you're saying there. I can corroborate that as probably factual what you saw. I've seen things like that myself. I've seen extremely bizarre light phenomena, which is completely unexplainable by geomagnetic science, as they always like to claim, in some way, shape, or form. So that's fascinating. Yeah, it does seem like there was a meeting of the angels going on above your head in some weird way, and for the northern light colours to be emanating from a particular star is something definitely something to think about. And I wonder what people's theories are in the chat if they have an idea what may have happened there. But
Well, the thing is, Paul, is that knowing that with this information I'm about to present, believing this new, completely different take on the 1,000-year millennial reign, um, you know, you can't help but to get, like, when you see something like that, like I was probably the only flat earther, possibly, that was actually directly below it, that actually saw it. So why me on the earth and seeing it? And then you get hyper spiritual about it. Oh, if I come into like a new revelation, or like me and Paul and Timothy, we're going to do it again. We're going to start a new religion. You get that kind of like, why me?
well,
So
I won't go that far and say
yeah,
starting a
I
new
don't.
religion,
That's what I'm saying is, you
but
get the
yeah,
other worldly stuff, and you get like
yeah,
a road to Damascus, and you go, why? Why did I happen to see that? And
absolutely.
almost undeniable. So I want to start first off with the only way people can actually proceed with what we're talking about is they have to believe that most of the things throughout recorded history are not completely lies made up of whole cloth, but they're either an embellishment or a twisting or a template or a typology. When you get to things like Genghis Khan and what the Muslims did and that type of thing, yeah, maybe the Muslims took over the earth, a third of the earth in 99 years, like they tell us. Maybe not. And then there's other people that come out saying, look, Muhammad didn't even live. He wasn't even talked about until close to the 9th century.
Hmm.
So the big thing is the lies. People have to they have to take and say, look, we know we've been lied to. We got lied to about 9/11. We got lied to about JFK. We got lied to about, and this is kind of stealing from you, Paul. We got lied about Y2K. We got lied about 9/11.
Hmm.
We find out we got lied about the actual shape of the earth. I mean, these crazy people, they went for the whole enchilada to
Hmm.
believe that they could actually lie that we're on some spinning ball going 254 miles an hour faster than the speed of sound.
Hmm.
That's what they want you to believe. We're spinning 1,039 miles an hour when the speed of sound is only like 761 miles an hour or something. So they actually want you to believe right now that we're spinning a couple hundred miles an hour faster than the speed of sound. So it's the lies. They lied about the Tartarian Empire. We can see the mud flood. They won't give any explanation for it. They just lied. And so why wouldn't they lie about basically the kingdom, um, uh, basically the kingdom of the 1,000-year kingdom of Yeshua. Why wouldn't they? So
Hmm.
now that you know that they're lying, then the next thing that you have to do is you have to say, how could they pull this off? All right, if they're actually lying about something so big that Christ's 1,000-year kingdom has come and gone, how is it they could pull this off? And Paul, I don't know where you fall in this camp, but I have seen enough footage. I have actually seen it when my wife and I we were actually looking for a home in this area. We were looking to well, first the rent before my sons actually ended up buying this farm that I kind of manage now, a little 5-acre organic farm. And we were looking for a house, and we rolled up in this driveway where this guy was basically selling his house, and we surprised him. Uh, he was 35-ish, very fit, tall, and my wife and I walked up, side by side. We weren't holding hands, but we surprised him, and he turned around. And when he turned around, we saw his eyes go from normal mammalian eyes to like straight rattlesnake reptilian eyes.
Hmm.
It was so much that my wife and I grabbed each other's hand, and she squeezed it, and I basically said, "Come on, woman, don't freak out." But that's what I'm saying is I'm getting into the serpent seed line and the Illuminati bloodlines. The only way you're going to be able to hide something or attempt to hide something as big as the 1,000-year reign of Christ is that you had to have secret societies.
Hmm.
You had to have the serpent seed line, flesh and blood, uh, Canaanite genetic people that rule over us, that are inside the system, that are actually hiding all this. In fact, once they thought they could hide the 1,000-year reign of Christ, no wonder they went, let's just hide the whole earth. Let's just make everybody think that they're on a spinning ball earth, that, that are like slugs or bugs on a little grain of, planet.
Hmm.
And so the only way to pull it off is you have to have that basically core group of people um,
Yeah.
uh, in there.
I get what you're saying there. So it's kind of like this idea, isn't that? Well, look, if they've got the first big lie mastered, which is that Christ reigned for 1,000 years, if they can hide that from that base of once the population's convinced that that never happened, you could then make up anything and make them believe it. That's probably what happened, isn't it? They probably saw like we've managed to convince the whole earth that Jesus was never here. What else can we convince them of? And then they rolled with it and started to go, like I said, go down the heliocentric model and all these other things, and the Age of Enlightenment started to explain everything away with science, and making up myths and legends about billions of years and vast infinite space and all this type of thing. And it's kind of the only reason they felt so bold to make those lies and get away with it, knowing they could get away with it, is because they did manage to convince the Earth that the 1,000-year reign never happened. And after that, I mean, it's inhuman, isn't it? I did theorize, and I think we were talking about this the other day with Joe, because I think Tucker Carlson even said it himself. But it's kind of, you look at all the deception and the lies and the evil going against humanity, and you have to realize that animals in the animal kingdom don't do this to themselves like humans do. Like, we're almost like destroying ourselves and making our lives 10 times worse and killing ourselves. It's like other animals don't do this. So you have to wonder if there's an influence behind it all that isn't human, that makes all these things happen. Because why else would humanity be so self-destructive? It makes no sense. But what, like I said, what if there is something inhuman influencing us and has been for a long time? And you would have to be inhuman and have humanity's interests not at your top priority if you could convince the earth of such heinous lies. Like, you cannot be a human if you're willing to lie that much to all of humanity. There's something else, isn't it? We call it a spirit within you of a demon, maybe, or you are literally the blood seed line of demons. I don't. That's speculation, but something inhuman's going on for sure.
Exactly, yeah, and it is dangerous. Jesus actually talks about the parable of the wheat and the tares, and
Hmm.
once people realize, like I am, I've seen hundreds of hours of live footage of literally people that can shapeshift. I've seen all kinds of stuff. There's no doubt in my mind. But with that being said, there is something that you have to put in your mind, especially as these people who seem to rule over the earth and are just putting us through hell,
Hmm.
is that Jesus did say, yeah, uh, there are tares that were sown among you, and they were of the enemy. But he says, look, vengeance is mine. Furthermore, when the servants came to Jesus and said, look, what do you want us to do? The tares are growing up among the wheat, which are the serpent seed line among the wheat. Talk about the parable of the wheat and the tares. Jesus says, no, no, don't rip them up. Don't hurt them. Let them all grow together until the end. And then I will send my angels to reap. And then I'll separate the wheat from the tares. Um, but yeah, you're right, Paul. The only way they could pull this off is not only did they have to have secret societies and people of this particular
Hmm.
serpent seed line bloodline. Some people call them reptilian human hybrids. But um, once they did see that they were able to trick the world, and not just the world, Paul, think about right before they um, ruled out the whole ball earth type thing. Now, some
Hmm.
people say, well, they rolled it out, you know, Newton and those people back then, Copernicus, about 1500. No, it really only got rolled out because there was actually textbooks. Dave Wise, who does a flat earth app, he went to visit this woman who was, oh, she was really old, like 108 years old, in an old folks home. And he sat down to talk to her about her life. And he was laying out to her that the earth was flat. And she didn't have Alzheimer's. She was in good shape. And she goes, well, wait a minute. I remember that. And he says, you do? She says, yeah. I remember being a little girl. It was about 1918 or 1920, I think it was. And the men came in and they collected all of our textbooks. Um, and up until that point, they were telling us that the earth was flat. And they actually had textbooks. And these men came in, they collected them. They told the children, do you have any more books at home or any place else? They said no, and they left. But anyways, this woman, as old as she was, she actually remembers it. But when they were really able when they thought they could actually sell the spinning ball Earth, was when they got the pastors, Paul. It's when Darby and Schofield, once they got a group of uh, pastors, basically to believe it uh, and buy into it. And then they all went to the Rothschilds' theological cemeteries. Once they had the preachers that didn't believe no longer in the 1,000 year reign of Christ, they go, "We got them. Now we'll do the earth."
Hmm.
And so, just an observation. If you actually take a look at the timeline, talk for just a minute, and then I'll be right back. 30 seconds.
Sure. Well, everything you're saying that makes sense. And that woman's testimony is fascinating because I really don't think it was that long ago. History was pretty much rewritten. And you can find articles, from like the early 1900s talking about, oh no, the globularists are at it again. This odd word they had for people who believe in the spherical Earth. Calling them globularists. And it was not common or just basic settled science and well understood as the fact that everything was just infinite vast space, infinite universes, and giant gas balls in space. And it did not take that long really to cover it all up and remove that and reprogram. I think it only takes a generation or two realistically. And I was explaining earlier in another video, no, people were saying like, surely if the millennial reign of Christ had already happened, we would have books talking about that time, and there would be people who remember their great grandfather talking about that time, and they would have talked about it. And it's kind of like, you really think so? You really think people would remember when they were a child something their great great grandfather told them when they were a kid? Do you really think? I don't think so. I think younger generations tend not to listen to older generations, and I think the older generations have always assumed that the younger generations are being taught the same things they were in the institutions, and they're not. So kids come home every day, and the parents say, "Did you have a good day at school today?" They go, "Yeah, yeah, it was fun." And that's it. They leave it at that, you know. And it's like, "What did you learn about today?" "Oh, we learned about history." "Oh, interesting." And then that parent will just assume they must have learned about the same history as me and the same science I learned when I was growing up. But no, the schools are constantly changing the curriculum. They are constantly changing the programming, and each generation gets dumber and dumber and more detached from reality. And the parents are none the wiser and never question it or answer it, because on the surface, well, they can read and write. Everything must be going just fine. And it's that simple, because people, and again, we are distracted. We are wrapped up in our own lives, taxes, bills, pressures, death, pain, misery, illness, all the other things you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, that you don't have time to stop and look around and go, "Whoa, wait
Right.
a minute, these buildings look insane. Where did these come from?" How often do you have time to even look up? Never mind check out some buildings and look into the dodgy history behind them, and what they tell us. It's just not on the cards. So people that say, "Oh, there would be more people who talked about this in our historical record," well, no. And also, paper doesn't last that long. It degrades pretty damn quickly. I have a book from 1883, which is Grimm's Fairy Tales, and it's falling apart at the seams. Okay, it's crumbling. The paper is turning to dust. Okay, they don't last that long when exposed to moisture in the air. Okay, and we're talking the millennial reign may have ended what, let's just say 1776, like 250 years ago. There wouldn't be many books that survived that long, and those that did survive probably, well, they would have got removed or destroyed or buried under brand new books. Millions and trillions of brand new books that got written that people are reading instead. Why do you think they'd be reading these books about history of that time? And like I said, there's been a huge effort to bury this, and it does not take that long. So that's all I'm saying.
Right. Yeah, no, no, absolutely. And also, you just stop and think. A flat Earth is so easy to prove that there's no curvature on the Earth. Anybody now can
Hmm.
do it if they got the right camera, or if they got the right type of telescope or whatever. They can easily prove that there's no curvature on the Earth, and yet they won't even do that. Something that's so right in their face, and yet they still can't. They still can't acknowledge it. So yeah,
Hmm.
um, but so now you talked about 1776, but I'm going to go into now my epiphany. This is where my big revelation comes from. So everybody talks about the short season of Satan in Revelation 20, and the short season of Satan, which, by the way, in the Greek, it's actually, the word is actually time. This is in Revelation 20. So everybody says, well, after the 1,000-year reign of Christ, then Satan is released from the pit for a short season. When actually, if it's not season, but even if it was season, if you actually take man and take a look at man, the season of man, that's basically 7,000 years. If you want to take a look at it like that. The Bible also talks about, man is like grass. He shoots up and then, he withers away. His days are like the days of grass, or a flower. The flower grows up and blooms. Or even like in the parable of the wheat and the tares. So, other words, the beginning of creation, the master goes out, he sows the field with the wheat, the enemy comes and sows with the tares. Then after one season, the season of man, then there's a harvest. So the short season of Satan, some people say, oh, just a couple hundred years. I've got a completely different take on it. And this is why. And this is where I'm about to become, a lot of people might consider me, hijacker's gone too far. He's now a heretic. And so this is what I believe, Paul. I believe that when Jesus came, that the season of man was over. He was the crown jewel of God's creation. When Christ came back, crucified, died, and then was resurrected, that was the end. In other words, man had lived. He did all his wars, his empires, everything. It was it. It was lights out for man. And then Christ showed up. And so that was it. And this is what I think happened. And I'm going to back it up with actual scripture here, with and I'm not going to read everything verbatim, but I'm going to skip through all the different scriptures here. But it says that Christ, once he was crucified, he went into Sheol or Hades. And basically, if you look, that mankind was done, stick a fork in it, it was over. When he went to Hades, there was billions of souls there. It was over for him. What did Christ actually say he came to do? To redeem the dead, to redeem that which was lost. They were the dead. In other words, he came to Sheol, to Hades. And it says they saw a great light. Basically, he came to the gates of hell. And so here is just a couple scriptures of what actually happened with Christ going to Hades, and the promise that he actually gave billions of souls. Now you got to remember, mankind was over. It was done. They were all lost. When Christ actually was crucified, he went down to redeem the dead, to buy back. If you actually take a look at redemption, if you actually take a look at, how he's actually saving the dead, he went to the dead. Well, the good dead in Hades, there's supposed to be different kinds. You had the prophets, David, that type of thing, where they were on their soul sleep in Hades. Well, they were the righteous. They were released immediately. It talks about more than 500 were witnessed when he was resurrected. But there are also sinners there, your normal sinners. Now, this is not like hell. Hell is with the bad place, the fire, where the wicked are. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking a vast sea of humanity was actually in Hades. And so this is what it says in the Old Testament, Sheol, 66 scriptures. Sheol, it's saying Sheol, but in the New Testament, it changes it to Hades. So Hades and Sheol are basically the same thing. Mm-hmm. So Hosea 13:14. I shall ransom them from the power of Sheol. I shall redeem them from death. Unquote. Ecclesiastes 9:10. There's no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol. So it's a place of like soul sleep. Jonah 2:2 says, and this is somebody in Sheol. I called out to the Lord out of my distress. Then this guy's dead. He's in Sheol. He's in Hades. Called out in my distress. And he answered me. And out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. Very interesting. And it does actually say that when Christ in the New Testament, when he went to Sheol, they saw a great light when he was in the belly of Hades. Psalm 9:17. And this is another wild one. The wicked return to Sheol. What do you mean the wicked return to Sheol or Hades? All of the nations and the people that forgot God. So what do you mean they're returning? Another one. I think this is a continuation. The Lord kills and brings to life. He brings down to Sheol, Hades, and then raises them up again. What is this? I mean, people are like living and they're dying, they're going to Sheol, and he's raising them up and they're going back. What's really going on here? Let's see. When Christ went to Sheol, hell, he basically, this is my premise. Mankind was over. He goes, look, no, before you are all lost, what I did on the cross, I'm going to give you another chance. I'm going to give you a promise, because it actually talks about what he actually did when he went down and proclaimed the promise. 1 Peter 3:18 through 20. Jesus went to hell, the heart of the earth. He went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison. What did he proclaim? What could Christ at all offer anybody in Hades at all at that one point. Again, Isaiah 9:2, and they're all throughout the Bible. This is all. In fact, that's what the 1,000-year reign of Christ was all about, was actually preparing the earth for these billions of people that were actually trapped. But here's Isaiah 9:2. People walked in darkness, saw a great light, who dwelt in the land of deep darkness. And then his light shone upon them. Whose light? The light of Christ. Matthew 4:6. Let's see. Dwelt in the realm. They dwelt in the realm of the shadow of death, and on them a great light dawned. And then I'm not going to keep on with the more scriptures. Just one more. He brought them out of Psalm 107, verse 14. He brought them out of darkness and the shadow of death and burst their bands asunder. This is my epiphany. This is my revelation, Paul, and this is what's going to cause me to be a heretic. That when Christ died on the cross, that was it for mankind. What he actually did. And he had the authority. A lot of people say, well, no, that's not scripture. You're talking about reincarnation. You're talking about Christ going down on all these people that are trapped in Hades. And basically, he's going to break their bands and lead captive the captives. And he's going to bring them up, even though you saw, and I didn't even go through all the scriptures in the Old Testament. They're all over the place. But no, what I'm saying is he went down, he made a promise that he proclaimed to those that were captive of the great, basically the gospel. Well, you and I know the Bible says there is actually only one way to come to the Father, and that's by faith through Jesus Christ. That is the only. Do you think those people in Hades, when Jesus went down, he was probably 500 foot tall, shone like the sun, and all these people in darkness? And he goes, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Which one of them, Paul, down there is going to say, yeah, I'm with you, buddy. I believe you. No. Jesus told him, no, you're not. You cannot believe like that. You can't believe because I showed up and you're in this dark place. Of course, you all are going to believe in me. No, you all are going to get a memory wipe. And then I'm going to give you a fair chance. You are going to get a chance to live again. And you got to remember, when Jesus when he died on the cross and he went to Hades, all authority in heaven and in earth was given unto him. So these people, it says, well, no. The Bible says it. In fact, there's only one scripture. The Bible says a man lives once and then comes judgment. Well, all those people in Hades did live one time, or maybe more, who knows? But the very fact that Christ, who had all authority, power and authority on heaven and earth, he had the authority to say, you know what? It's over for you, but I come to redeem the actual dead. And this is what I also think that he said to him. He goes, look, right now I'm going to take my holy ones out of here, the righteous ones out of Hades. They're coming with me in just 40 short years, 70 AD. I'm going to wrap up this whole Israeli covenant question. And that's really what the book of Revelation is about. I'm going to wrap that up. But then this is what I'm going to do. I am going to build out a world in which once I release billions of you sinners and you start to circulate up upon the plane of the earth, you're going to get your second chance. You're going to get a memory wipe. Yeah, you are going to get a second chance, and you're going to actually get a straight up fair chance to hear the gospel. In other words, Jesus basically told to every created living being that was created in the beginning, you all are going to get a straight up chance to hear the gospel of Christ on how to be saved. This is what I'm going to do for you. But first, the world is going to be ripped up. I've got to build it out. I've got to get ready to take billions of people, because once you come up on the earth, Satan will be released, and then you are going to have to exercise your free will. And the other question you have to ask yourself, why would why would Jesus do this? Why would he imprison Satan for 1,000 years? And then all of a sudden say, oh, by the way, why don't you come on back? The place is built out. Why don't you come on back up and have yourself a fun for a couple hundred years or a couple thousand years? Why would he do that? Because Christ knew that the only way those billions of souls had a chance to be saved and accept him by faith is they had to come up to a world of duality. And the second thing that you got to think about is that those billions of people, souls that were actually in Hades, were already captured by Satan himself. They were his. He had won them. Christ, through his redemption power of the cross, he went down. Even it says it, and the gates of hell will not prevail against. When he's talking to Peter, he says, upon this rock. And he goes, the gates of hell will not prevail against what? The church. And so this is my epiphany, is that that promise was made to those billions of people. And so go ahead, talk a little bit, and let me go through the notes, and then then we'll get into the actual 1,000-year reign of Christ. But that is my big thing, Paul, is that I believe that the 1,000-year reign of Christ was all about Christ physically preparing a world of plenty of infrastructure, canals. I'm going to go into it in a minute. There turns out there was vast orchards of banana trees, orchards of all over. Fisheries were packed out. Just trees, billions of trees were planted, which people could make. But anyways, I'll get into that. But let me just go through these notes so I can wrap this up. About that is my sort of new, and it turns all of Christianity on its head, because basically what I'm saying, and I've got all the information to back it up. The church fathers, they said Christ's 1,000-year reign has come and gone. 5 of the 7 directly come out. But anyways, that's another little section. But so this is my premise, is that the whole reason for Christ's 1,000-year reign was to build out the earth. Then after that building out, after that 1,000 years, not only was Satan released from the pit, but then those billions of people then had a chance to circulate into a world in which I'm about to say, like, the last 2,000 years was hellish as far as wars and killing and everything else. But we can go into, yeah. And so you won't find that in any Christian doctrine. That would be considered heresy, that Christ actually redeemed the people that were in Hades, giving them an actual straight up second chance. That was his will. That was his judgment. Man lives once and then comes judgment, and he made his judgment. Go ahead, and let me just go through the notes so I can get to the second part. So the next section.
Yeah, so I've heard this idea you've talked about before, and it is a fascinating way of perceiving the millennial reign and giving it more of a purpose other than Jesus just flexing his power. It seems like you said, it it would make sense that it was an attempt to build infrastructure, so to lay down the pipe work, the canal work, the buildings, the homes, the plenty, the farmland, everything necessary, the train lines, the roads, everything that a king, a millennial kingdom you would expect, where people living in harmony would build. But then it wasn't just for the saints to rule during, because they are blessed that they get to take part in the first resurrection and reign with Christ for those 1,000 years. So obviously there would have been people around as well that maybe survived tribulation, also got to live through it. Even Jesus' enemies got to live through it. The people of the fourth beast kingdom had the kingdom taken away from them and given to the saints, and they had to live through and watch all of that. So there's a lot of stuff going on, but it does make sense, doesn't it? He was preparing for something in the future. It was a preparation event. The 1,000-year reign, though nice to live through, if you were lucky enough to be someone who was a resurrected saint who got to rule during that time, or even just live during it, it wasn't just so you could have a good time. It was to lay the foundation for a future generation, a people that's coming, a vast multitude, the numbers of the sands of the sea, that is coming, you know, in some way to fill out this earth. Because even then, people say there was a huge population boom about 200 years ago, you know, or so. And before that, the population was relatively small. And could it be that that's because the millennial reign had ended and the beginning of the release of these people in Sheol, these, you know, all of humanity who never knew Christ and never had a chance to be redeemed because Christ wasn't around? This is their chance to live in a world where there's free will, there's evil, there's good, there's choices to be made, a side to choose, you know, and Christ can be known more than ever today. You know, the gospel is everywhere. And that's what it was built for. It was built for us to live in and to, so we have a chance to actually be in a state of survival, you know, no longer in a state of survival mode. We can live comfortably and make the moral choice without having to worry about, you know, nature killing us, for example. It wasn't a reset where we had to start from scratch in the jungles again and build our way up, you know. It was more of a, okay, you have a civilization you can inhabit and live in here. You know, and obviously Satan had his own plans and his own agendas of how he was going to do all of this himself, and he's still got his own rebellion thing going on, I'm sure. But I do like the idea. I like the theory you've got there, and there is biblical to back up this idea, because it does say, you know, blessed are those who take part in the first resurrection, because they get to reign with Christ for 1,000 years. You know, but it does say the rest of the dead live not again until the 1,000 years has ended.
That's right.
It does say it there in black
Yeah.
and white. So who are the rest of the dead? And who are these people that get to come back? You know,
And
people.
then you read all the scriptures on Sheol and all the scriptures on Hades, and you realize, wait a minute, Christianity didn't even start until after the 1,000-year reign of Christ,
Mhm.
basically. And that was basically for us. But yeah, without a question. And the other thing you have to think about if you were Satan and were just released after 1,000 years, and you realize what the score was. First off, you came up to the plane of the earth and you realize the whole friggin' world was built out. Incredible.
Mm.
Tens of thousands of glorious cities, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of incredible buildings, infrastructure built out. And then you found out what? Those billions of people that I caught in Hades before, the Most High is actually giving them a second chance of the ones I've already captured. In fact, there's actually a scripture talks about let the dead bury the dead. Um, uh, yeah, Christ's kingdom was about redeeming that which was lost, saving the dead from the second death. Redeem, it does mean buy back, past tense. These people were lost. What Christ did on the cross was for the dead, snatching them from hell and destruction. And now you have some people that basically saying, no, this whole idea of what you're talking about, Paul and Timothy, nah, you crazy that the 1,000-year reign of Christ was about building out the infrastructure so that the unsaved and the damned from Hades, billions of them, could actually get a chance to actually hear the gospel and get a straight up chance to accept Christ through faith. They go, no, it was a Sabbath. We know from the scriptures that the 1,000-year reign was the 1,000-year Sabbath rest. Well, what did Jesus say about the Sabbath? The Sabbath was made for man. And he even goes into it when the scribes come to him and they go, wait a minute, your disciples were eating grain off there. You're not supposed to harvest or anything on the Sabbath. And then Jesus turned to him and goes, look, if you had an ox that fell in a ditch, it's on the Sabbath, would you not go and pull it out? And I think Jesus was alluding to, you know what I'm going to do with my Sabbath? I'm going to work everybody's ass off, and we're going to build out an incredible place so that when these billions of people are released, they'll come. And so you got that. And I call actually Satan's little season, which actually it says little, it says little time. If you actually take a look in the Greek, I think it was a special age of grace. And then you also, you got scriptures like, let the dead bury the dead. And he already talks about, no, these people are already dead. And if you think about all of these people that did come out of Hades, They were the dead.
Mhm.
Well, what is the only way that the dead can come to life once they're in this world? They got to get saved. That is how they become alive again. So it talks about you were already dead. Yeah, you were dead in Hades. You were given permission to come up to the plane of the earth to live in this fleshly body. You're still dead though, and the
Mhm.
only way you come alive is through an act of faith. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah,
I'm just thinking
yeah,
it gives a whole new meaning to why zombie movies are so prevalent today, and the idea of the Walking Dead series. You know, what is it? What's it actually telling us there subconsciously? Is it trying to tell us that you are quite literally the dead resurrected, walking again on the earth, and you'll remain that way until you're saved? You know, I just imagine these. It's kind of because if everything's an esoteric, symbolic message in the media about the reality of the situation, that's rang out to me quickly there while you were speaking. I just thought it was funny. Yeah, I'm not too worried about being called a heretic myself. I think God wants us to be creative thinkers. I think He made us in His image, and He is a creator God. I don't think He has any qualms with us trying to get to the bottom of the truth, wherever it leads us. And I think we're allowed to talk about and speculate these things. It's the dogmatic types who are the modern day Pharisees. You know, you're breaking the rules. You can't say or think about stuff like that. And it's kind of, yeah, that's exactly how the Pharisees treated Jesus, wasn't it? And I'm not saying I am Jesus or better than Jesus, but it's the same spirit behind that type of attitude. It's the idea of, this, you can't do anything on the Sabbath, and even Jesus said that's ridiculous. I think you misunderstand the purpose of the Sabbath. It was just to give you mankind a day of rest, so he doesn't work himself to death. It was for your own benefit. It wasn't for God's benefit necessarily. It's just funny. And then yeah, sorry, go ahead. I'll let you carry on. I just a few random thoughts there.
yeah. And then you got a couple of scriptures that would only make sense. The gates of hell will not prevail against the church. It's the
Hmm.
first time in the New Testament, by the way, that Christ was actually revealed by the apostle. Um, and then, yeah, why wouldn't Christ imprison Satan and all of a sudden let him loose? Why would you let that duality happen one
Hmm.
more time on the earth
Hmm.
after the 1,000-year reign? Why?
Yeah.
Um, and then also, you take a look at the disparity, the way people are born on this world. Now, you and I, there is something to say with Caucasian privilege. We get in our particular area of the world, basically the Western Christian world. You and I get a couple showers a day, 3 meals a day. We live, but if you actually take a look throughout the rest of the world, the way people live, there is a disparity, no question about it. I mean, and so um, based on what happened to you before, would depending on where you would be born again, and then get your second chance, or maybe third or fourth. Who could? I
Hmm.
mean, I can't see how a 12-year-old Nigerian uh, Muslim girl that never heard about Christianity 100 years ago and was the child bride of an imam, a 60-year-old imam, and she never had a chance to hear the gospel. How's that fair to her? And so all these people are going to get born. Anyways, we're born into a world. So now the next thing that we come to is now we talk about, Christ's main purpose was to save us and redeem the dead, to prepare the earth so that each basically has a straight, uh, a, a fair shot. And so, and
Hmm.
that's what the 1,000-year kingdom was about. Now we get on to Christ, um, 70 AD, a kingdom. What would he do? So now that we know all of this, but that his real mission was to actually save the dead, to redeem that which was lost. It was already lost. Satan had won him, which, by the way, when Satan came back up, you don't think he was mad when he says, what? I captured billions of souls, and now all of a sudden you're going to give them a second chance and release them? You're going to give them all a chance?
Hmm.
We'll see about that. I own them, which is also another reason why you can see that people that aren't Christians, that they have um, a demonic influence is a lot stronger over people that are not saved versus are, because he had already won them once, and now
Hmm.
he's basically trying to win them again. So you got to stop and say, okay, what would Christ do with his 1,000-year kingdom? This is what I think he did, Paul. I think he called his saints together after seeing what I saw with Arterius and what looked like Jesus actually visited him, which was above my head. I think the stars did fall. We don't know. We can't trust any history. Once I go into the secret society bit, then you're going to know, wait a minute, there's a whole class of people out there that have been working against us. You're talking documents. You're talking manuscripts. You ought to see the level of deception once I get into here real quick. But so I believe the stars of heaven would fall. And so and actually helped. And I didn't actually believe it until about a week ago. Now, the thing in the Arterius and the stars being messengers or angels, was in my head, right? But by the way, the Book of Enoch was actually part of the Bible until the Jesuits, through their printing companies, decided to take it out in the 18th centuries. So just the little fact that was canon. So he pulled his crew together, and this is what I think he said to him. Like a week ago, I saw this. It was a 28-acre complex on a high mountaintop. You may be able to Google this and see it. It was 12 grand, glorious churches in Ethiopia. I mean, these are like really old buildings, and they're all connected through tunnels underneath. And there's this society of world. Other words, when you got a building so beautiful, the UN and the world gives them a designation, a world site. It's a site which is considered like the Grand Canyon is like a world site that the UN says belongs to the whole world. Certain things belong to the whole world. I'm missing the word. And there's a society that goes around to these buildings, and all these particular buildings they consider like a world glorious site.
A heritage site.
Yeah, heritage. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Heritage site. Anyways, so this World Heritage Site that restores these old buildings, that goes around to all these really old Tartarian, Greco-Roman, 1,000-year reign of Christ buildings, and they go around and they just restore them, or they want to modify them or reinforce them because they're falling apart, right? And now we're finding out through these other YouTubers that they're going in, they're finding gold, they're looting them, they're finding their books that are in the walls, insignia that they're covering up. Anyways, this group went to Ethiopia for these 12 different churches that are connected in this 28-acre compound. And they go, well, we want to restore them. And the Ethiopian church says, wait a minute, you don't understand. You can't touch those. You see, because our tradition says that during the day, we worked on these churches, building them. But then at night, the angels of God went in and we could see them working through their great light, their great presence. They worked on them. You can't touch any of those rocks. Those are angelic carvings by angels themselves. For you to touch any part of this church is desecrating it. And I went, wow. And it's like a real controversy there. I think it's Ethiopia. It could be Yemen. Not really sure. But so they saying, look, you can't touch this little World Heritage Site. You're going to come in and you're going to redo everything. No. Angels actually helped carve out these churches in this complex. And so I'm thinking, Paul, when I take a look at the immense amount of infrastructure that was built out on the earth, I'm talking canals, bread baskets, fisheries, everything. When you actually take a look of what actually Christ did to actually prepare the earth for Satan's little season, or what I call the special age of grace, in which billions of souls would be released from Hades to actually give them a straight up fair chance. It's just so much work. Of course, the angels did fall from heaven. Of course, during that 1,000 years, that's what they did. They all worked their butts off. and they were all together too. If you think about it, the angels throughout all humanity, or the stars, they had watched humanity. They watched the wars and all the crucibles and everything they went through. So when finally Christ, they came down to earth, Christ says, look, we got to try to save them. And this is, but we need the infrastructure to save them, because once they get released, as I'll go on here shortly, is they're just going to do nothing but kill each other. There's going to be wars. They're going to be lucky to live to 20 years old to even hear about the gospel of Christ. They're so bloody and they're so violent. And so that's what I think he did. He basically pulled his crew together and says, this is the plan. This is what we have to do. We have to set up seed granaries. We have to set up bread baskets of the earth, whether it's Ukraine, there's one in Iran, there's a big one in Russia. There are ones in different places in the earth. There's one, the Great Plains of the United States, which were once called the breadbasket of the world. I think they actually domesticated bison and actually plowed that up. There's no reason for the middle of the United States, some of the most fertilest ground in the whole world, to be, it should have been full of trees, but it was what it was full of. It was full of 60 million bison, which we basically slaughtered down to 532 pairs before somebody says, do you think it's a really good idea to wipe out all the buffalo, the bison? And so maybe that was their inheritance. There's 60 million of them. But anyways, the signs are actually everywhere. Once you start to take a look at the canals, Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, 10,000 miles of canal in the United States. I thought it was just like the C&O Canal they built in like 8 years. 343 miles from one Great Lake down to something, right? I thought it was just like a couple of little canals, a little horses pulled thing. It turns out, no, there's over 10,000 canals even before the bulldozer was even invented. But go ahead, comment, and let me just look through these notes, and then I'll go to the next clip real quick.
Well, that's just canals in America. You mean Europe is full of it too? It's the exact same thing. I mean, many of the coastal cities of northern Europe are underwater, and the way they are kept, like Amsterdam, for example, it practically is underwater, but it has so many canals and obviously things built out at sea to keep the water at bay. It's unprecedented when you actually think about the engineering behind such feats from these supposedly old generations of people. It's actually mind boggling in retrospect. But yeah, no, I again that is the picture you're painting is a believable one. I can believe that, Christ got all of his crew together as soon as the millennial reign began. Angels and resurrected saints, which were practically as powerful as angels by that point in their new bodies, and new capacities and brain capacities and body capacities with light bodies and all these type of things. And yeah, they got to work with really just massively building this place out with mansions everywhere, mansions upon mansions, and rows 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 of buildings and rooms. Look at Paris, for example. It's nothing but just rows of buildings and windows. It's these vast, grand, complex cities, multifaceted layered cities, which I even think today we're looking at shadows of what they used to look like. They've been destroyed and decimated.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But because, like I said, the population at that time wouldn't have been able to fill all of these places. Like there wouldn't have been that many, It wouldn't have been that millions or billions of people like there are today to fill all these rooms that were around for some reason hundreds of years ago. The population wasn't there to fill these places, and it does start to make more sense why it's kind of like once they were finished, they took photos of all these empty cities that they just built. And we see all these photos everywhere, don't we, of like just massive cities with no one walking around. There's just nobody walking around in them. It's just completely empty. It's like, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Where is the population that fills these cities? And maybe they were ghost towns, and that's the point. They were built to be that way because they were preparing for a huge influx of people to turn up who, like you said, were going to be brutal, horrible sinners. Like the worst of the worst were coming back, And like I said, most of our known history is brutal war after war after war after war with swords and new emerging technologies outwards from there. It's just mankind massive power struggles, borders being put up and shifting lands and empires, kings against kings and all these type of things. Just massive power struggles to dominate what was there, and invade and take over everything. And that is human history. Practically, since the Enlightenment and even before, if you want to go through the feudal battles that happened during the Middle Ages, in the Dark Ages between warring kingdoms, you have to wonder. Like, I think you said this as well. We don't really know really how long that time actually went on for. Maybe it was the history that we've been given, and the 1,000 years is just literally erased from history for all we know. And maybe we do have 2,000 years worth of brutal battles happening throughout humanity, because it was a case of the king's now left, and what's left are people who need to fill that power vacuum.
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
I'll let you go on
Yeah.
from there, but go ahead.
No, yeah, no, I'll get to that. But just so people think about Christ's 1,000-year kingdom, and then reverse engineer actually what he did. He came back to restore the earth. Like God told Adam, be fruitful and multiply. Okay, Adam was pretty good with that. But then God told him to subdue the earth. Yeah, every creepy, crawly thing, everything that flies. Other words, so the first thing that Christ, when he came back, first off, it says all of the fish in the sea, which was the Mediterranean, was dead. Volcanoes were popping off. That whole part of the world was completely ripped apart. So he had to restore that. It said as in the days of Noah. So there could have been hybrid. There could have been griffins, and there could have been manticores and manitors. We know there were dogmen, and for whatever reason, that's the other thing is, why did Christ leave alive, these people that we call the Khazarians, that were basically in the Ukraine at the time? And basically he said, look, I'm not gonna harm you, even though you've got the Canaanite bloodline. You're not going to come up to my house once a year to give, or I'm not going to let you into the house to give during the 1,000-year reign. You can come up and make an offering, but you're not going to enter my house. And that's in Zechariah. But why did he let those people? Why did he let the red-headed giants of the North America exist? He could have wiped them out. He went and he said to them, look, don't be snatching the men creatures. Don't be snatching their women. The dog men, he basically confined to an island, but he let those. And we got, of course, St. Christopher. But when you actually take a look at Christ's 1,000-year reign of what he did, the star forts, the cities, the thousands of buildings, the canals, the packing out the oceans. In fact, during the 18th century, there were so many whales, so many, that the world literally was able to survive off whale oil. Whale oil was like oil is today for us. And that carried mankind, just that, for 100 years. And in fact, there's stories that they could go to the North Atlantic, off the coast of where you're at, Scotland, England. They could throw a net overboard. In one net, they would get as many cod as the boat could carry with one net. I mean, everything was plush, full out. Also, think about during what the millennial reign would look like. It would be about building. It would be about art. It would be about music, architecture, agriculture, horticulture, gardens, flowers. You're not talking about a world that we're in right now. If you would have went to Jesus at the time, you were like a saint, and says, well, look, Jesus, the saints need some R&R or whatever. So we're thinking about doing, building a stadium where we can kick a ball around, or, I got a golf course. We want to spend some time doing golf course. Or no, Jesus, we need to put a gym in. I need to be able to work out at a gym 4 times a week. There's no gyms. There was no golf courses or stadiums. This was about honest work. This was about music. This was about higher spiritual things, getting together in these cathedrals, which a lot of people believe they had healing energies to them with the pipe organs and all. This would have been a completely different type of world. It wouldn't have been combustion engines. In fact, some say that what I saw coming out of Arterius, basically, if that was the glory of Christ, which I'm almost sure that's what I saw, that would be the free energy. Maybe
Mm.
that went throughout and created all kinds of energy. But
Mm.
Christ would come, he would subdue the earth, get it from a jungle, and then he would basically put in all of this basically infrastructure. So,
Mm.
and then the other thing, my last point before we get on to actual breaking this down, is that um, Christ had to build the infrastructure out for those 1,000 years, because just the residual strength of the infrastructure and the church, which later got corrupted into the Catholic Church. I saw one guy on Joe Rogan, and Joe, he was an historian, and he was talking to Joe Rogan about the fall of the Roman Empire. And he goes, you know, what's a funny thing about that? You can get this clip on Joe Rogan, and there's this big, lettered uh, theologian or whatever was talking to Joe Rogan, and he goes, well, the funny thing about the Roman Empire, we don't know quite exactly how it happened so fast, but it seems like the Roman Empire went from an empire to all of a sudden it was converted to this like Holy Roman Catholic Church thing, and it seemed to happen overnight. And if you actually take, and I'll hit the scripture later on, it does talk about the seventh king that was and is not, but then will become the eighth king, will live again.
Mm.
Other words, and so was that the Holy Roman Empire? Were they talking about when I get to that scripture? But yeah, he did mention that, just how quick the turnover was. And then one final point about living during the millennial reign. Just think about you as a person. There would be a law. Look, if a person needs work, um, he can come and show up to any building and put him to work. We'll pay him 2 silver coins for a day's wage or whatever. You know, it would be hard work. It would be worship. It would be, think about people, how they would be 100% effective and efficient. They would be doing their purpose in life. Think about living during the reign of Christ, and you're 30 years old, Paul, and you're thinking, what do I really need to do? And then you would go to somebody that would be like a spiritual elder or a saint, and you're saying, what is it? And he goes, well, no, I can see your aura. I can see your purpose of God, what you should be doing. You should be building such and such, or you should be putting together this particular worship program, or this is what you're really good at. You're really good at, etching words in scripture. You have a knack for it, or you got a knack for gardening, or you got a knack for uh, husbandry, working with animals. In other words, people would have been their most efficient during that 1,000-year reign. So think about you, Paul, and your efficiency right now, times that by 10 or maybe 100. That's how much more effective and efficient. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, if I only did have a staff of 10 people, oh boy, that's all I would need.
I'm
But anyway,
exhausted. Yeah, I'm actually exhausted with the thing. I'm about to publish a book as well, and I'm working on that as well as all this. And yeah, I am limited in my capacity. I can tell you that much. But if I had a new body where my knees weren't giving out and I wasn't starting to get arthritis in my fingers, I could probably get a lot more done. You know, but yeah, you can imagine just how glorious that kingdom would have been, and just what these people who lived during that time would have been capable of, with nothing holding them back anymore, and no Satan around to hinder people, fill their mind with thoughts that are inappropriate or distractions. It's kind of full. No need, free energy everywhere, quite literally. We know the buildings had all these free energy devices on them, and people argue, well, Christ's kingdom isn't a physical kingdom, it's one in heaven. And yes, there is a heavenly kingdom of Christ that's eternal, absolutely. But there's also a temporary 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth too, a physical one. And that would look something like what we see on all these glorious buildings. And I think they've been defacing. I think they've been defaced since then. I think things have been added to them which weren't originally there. Demonic iconography, a takeover, like when a warring nation invades another nation, the first thing they do is put their own flags on buildings and claim it as their own, and then they start the campaign of rewriting history, don't they? Because it's written by the winners, and then they claim it as their own, and then they start removing the old iconography and putting up their own portraits, and these are the type of things that probably happen to these buildings. And people would say, like, oh, Christ wouldn't make mankind build buildings. It's kind of, well, humans, people on Earth, need roofs over their heads. We still have these needs as much as heaven exists and our Father is a heavenly Father. We're not. We're fleshly beings who need basic creature comforts to survive, like, heat and water and four walls and a roof, the basics. Why wouldn't Christ build those for us? Just because it's not in his nature that that he doesn't need these things, but he knows we do. So yeah, I think it's well within the realms of possibility that this is probably how it went down, and people were really enjoying your little rant there in the chat. I saw you were going with it there. You were rolling with all the connections. Just keep going. Keep
Oh
building
yeah,
off your
well,
ideas.
no, yeah, okay. So we work backwards. So now we know. Other words, we know what Jesus. We got our head in the game. Okay, that's what he did. He wanted to build out the infrastructure to save these billions of people. That once they came up and Satan was released, they got duality. They're going to get a chance to get saved. So where's the evidence for uh, this 1,000-year reign of Christ? And when you actually take a look around, it is literally everywhere. I talked about the bread baskets. A lot
Mhm.
of people don't know over 300,000 miles of railroad tracks were supposedly built between the 1800 and 1870. Of course, the breadbasket, the plains there, walls. Here's one. Here's one you're really gonna like, Paul. So I couldn't understand why all of the walls, and why do some places don't have walls? What is it about so many walls? And when you take a look at the old world, walls everywhere, cities, high walls, like Constantinople or Istanbul.
Mm.
That was the seat of the Eastern Roman Church. Their walls for hundreds of years. It took all went to I think the 11th century before the Muslims could actually take that city, and it's only because people left the daggone gates open. But walls, nothing has saved the lives of more men than walls. When I take a look, and I've been going throughout looking at all of the history of the Crusades and the Muslims, and this king taking this king, and then this guy trying to take this city, and it's always a siege. It's always men come together, and then there's walls that separate them. They settle into a siege, and they sit there. Not so when it's open battle. When
Mm.
it's open battle, like for instance, our Civil War, when guys are just meeting on the field, men liquidate each other really quick. So
Mm.
throughout all of history, all these armies are going back and forth, everybody trying to snatch another kingdom, another city, but the walls stop them. But what does it also stop? It stops the death of men. It causes men to actually live longer. Walls is probably the greatest invention that has saved more men than any other architecture in the world. And then you got to ask, well, why didn't North America have all these walls? Well, there were a lot of walls, but could Christ in his wisdom knew that once his 1,000-year kingdom was over, that there would be a die-off in North America, or maybe a depopulation, to where um, that what would happen in North America wouldn't come for another 1,000 years or hundreds of years later. And that's why you don't see New York City has walls, whereas you see in Amsterdam. In fact, star forts, literally hundreds and hundreds. I think Arlucis, there's some YouTuber, I can't say his name. I'm dyslexic. I flip things around. Anyways, he's got a YouTube, and he goes through where all the star forts are. Absolutely incredible. And a lot of these were the actual seeds of the city, like in the Netherlands and Amsterdam and uh, uh, Brussels. You should have seen the star fort of Brussels, and the paintings
Mm.
of Brussels before it was bombarded.
Mm.
But and then also, so we're just talking about the evidence. Um, there's this one company. It's called the Detroit Publishing Company. And as soon as the camera came into being, which was right around 1826, when we first got the first images. And by about 1840, you could take portraits. People could sit down. By 1850, you could actually take photographs of large landscapes and cities, and that's where you get it. Anyways, it's the Detroit Publishing Company. They did literally hundreds of thousands of photos. That's what their bailiwick was. They went all throughout the Midwest, taking landscape pictures of San Francisco, and everything. Well, from the 18th to 19th century, all the way up to 1920. And then all of a sudden, all of those pictures, in which you can still find some of them, they're in postcards. You'll see like postcards, like, old governor's mansions of Iowa and stuff, which are just like, or old mental institutions or prisons, incredible towering wall type structures. All of those pictures, the government came in and bought them up, the Library of Congress. So literally hundreds of thousands of old world building pictures that this company went all over the world to take, and in America, gone. Anyways, I could go into a lot of what the build out, all the evidence for the build out was the mud flood, and there's so many of them. Just the evidences of it. By the way, the language for more than 1,000 years was actually Latin. Every nation has what you would call a Sabbath in it. Latin does seem to be the origins of a lot of different languages. Even in Thailand, China, you'll find characters and stuff like that. Latin was the language of the Magna Carta. It was used all the way up to the 12th century. In fact, the Magna Carta, I think, was written in Latin. But I got a lot of notes here, but I don't want to go spend too much time on all the evidences, because there's just so many that all somebody has to do is just look. I mean, I can go through them. So I'm going to hit the next thing. And this gets into the release. So we've had Christ's kingdom. He's built it out. All the evidences are there. You could look backwards. If you would just go and look, you can see what we're talking about. There's no way that there was a period of time in which it would have had to have been 1,000 years of peace and prosperity and goodness to be able to build a world out that basically has been bombed, ripped apart. In fact, let me go into Satan's little. Satan is released from the pit, and so now the 1,000 years is over. I believe the New Jerusalem has actually moved over. In fact, somebody has actually done a map. If New Jerusalem was 1,500 miles by 1,500 miles by 1,500 miles tall or whatever, he overlaid it over the North Pole. And then he goes, well, maybe they're talking about 375 miles long, wide, high. And then that would actually go right over the center of the North Pole. Maybe it's cloaked. Maybe it's been pulled up above the North Pole a couple of dimensions. So we can't see it. But anyways, so that went, the 1,000 years was over. Now we get into Satan's little kingdom, in which he is released. And by the way, it doesn't say little season, man. It actually says time. And then I went into the season of man, where, okay, and now see, I'm one, Paul, that believes that this is what I believe. 70 AD, 1,000-year reign, which would be 1070 AD, when Satan was released and he came up to the plane of the earth and saw the whole place built out. He said to himself, you know what? I am just going to cancel that 1,000-year reign of Christ. I'm going to act like it never even happened. I am going to infiltrate the church. I'm going to sweep up and snatch up all the books. I am going to actually start wars. And I am actually going to restart, because it's very believable that this could be a continuation of the Roman Empire. The buildings aren't that high tech. There's no cars running around. There's no factories spitting out rubber and black smoke. I think I can make this work. I think I can just say that 1,000 years of reign never happened and convince enough of these men creatures along with my secret societies, deceive them, infiltrate, in which I can just pick the whole thing back up and just act like it's a continuation of the Roman Empire, except now it's the Holy Roman Catholic Church, in which I will infiltrate, and then I will take and the residual strength of Christ Church. That's what I will basically take. So it could very well be, it's been 2,000 years. And then here's something for people to understand about Satan. Anyways, Satan says, I will ascend to the heights of the clouds, height of the clouds above the throne, basically the throne of God, but you will not. You will be thrown down into the pit. And it's very interesting, this scripture, and this is Isaiah 14, chapter 14, verse 14, 17. Very telling about the nature of Satan. And so he's in the pit, and people are coming by and looking him, and they're saying looking upon Lucifer, Satan, is this the one that caused the earth to tremble, that shaked kingdoms, and made the world a wilderness, and destroyed the cities of the earth? He's a destroyer. So as soon as Satan was released, what did he come to do? Kill, steal, destroy. I mean, he went nuts. And so I believe when he came up, I think one of the first things he did is that he goes, you know what? I'm going to go check with my buddy, the ice giants in Antarctica. You know, Thor, Yeshua, is in the north. I'm going to go check with the ice giants in Antarctica that maybe have been kept out of Christ's kingdom. And so he went there, and they said, hey, Satan, we got some really cool tech. We got this one flying machine. We figured out how Christ can use free energy. And it was this particular machine. This can burn and bomb and rip up cities. You're going to love this machine, this particular construct. And so we now know, all based off the maps, we know Siberia was completely built out. In fact, the Siberia, that part of the Russia, in fact, if you take a look at some of these maps, Africa, South America, even in Antarctica, cities after city, everything was built out. Absolutely incredible. The first thing he goes, where did those 10 lost tribes of Israel, where did they spend their 1,000 years? Oh, that's Siberia. You ought to see a place like that. In fact, Marco Polo, he went to that part of Mongolia. And when he met the Khan, which means king or ruler, he goes, there's this one city that had like 10,000 bridges in it. He says it was the most glorious city. Anyways, we now know, looking at the map of what happened to Siberia, Satan ripped that place to pieces. I'm talking about 2,000-mile bombing campaign, lakes, 5-10 miles, all circular in circumference. Some of the lakes as much as 50. I don't know if he had the technology to. In fact, I started looking up the worst volcanoes or the worst super volcanoes. The 5 top super volcanoes that went off. Guess which was the worst one in history, Paul?
Surprise me. Go on.
Siberia. I mean, this thing was massive. I mean, this was like a 500-mile crater that blew out. I mean, it was like incredible. And so if you think about, and here gets into the next big revelation I had, the war of Gog and Magog was actually, if you take a look at the old maps, Paul, it's right there in that part of Russia. You can actually see where it says Gog and Magog. In fact, the Great Wall of China, the first name that it was given, which I believe it was a building project by our Messiah. I think the saints came to him and says, Lord, we got these Mongolians that like roam around on the land, and we got all these Chinese. and they just can't stop fighting. And I'm sure Jesus said, well, who's the political leadership? Let's get them. And I'm sure the saints said, no, no, you don't understand. These Mongolians and these Chinese, they don't have like leadership. They just they're like groups, and they wander and stuff, and they're just like stealing each other's wives and stuff. And we gotta bring peace to these people. It's not like a political structure. I think Jesus came up with, well, let's both pay them as a public works project to build a nice long wall. Both of them can build. They can get to know each other. Each one of them can make a couple of shekels of silver a day. Keeps peace, and when the thing is done, the wall's separating them, and we got them separated. And so could have been something like that. But the wall, the Great Wall of China, was first called the Wall of Gog and Magog. And so I believe now that as soon as Satan was released and he went and visited those ice giants in Antarctica and got that technology, whatever flying machine, directed energy weapon, which could rip up cities, we've seen them. We've seen 500 square block of San Francisco completely razed. People say, well, it's fire. Wait a minute. How does fire raise 500 blocks of beautiful, incredible buildings and just like vaporize them? How does that work? And so I believe that's when the actual war of Gog and Magog started, which is now, Paul. We've been in this war for a couple thousand years, basically. And so, yeah, the special age of grace in which we're released. And then the other thing that I think Satan, when he got released and he went to see his fellow demon ice giants or whatever in Antarctica, they'll say, well, the rumor is that Christ built this place out, and the reason why he did it. And we hear from some of the serpent seed line, which was also in Hades, for whatever reason, Jesus seemed to have made it carte blanche, because these people are being born now. These secret societies were all the way back, even in the 1,000-year reign of Christ. The Khazarian Empire was a real empire. You know, some people call it by another name in the Middle East, but the fact of the matter is, they did live in the Ukraine. And maybe the curse was taken off this Canaanite bloodline. And maybe Christ told these Khazarians, look, you got the Ukraine. I'll tell you what, I'll let you be the reapers and harvesters of the breadbasket of the earth. Just don't go stealing and killing and doing all the rest of that stuff that you do. Of course, once he left, that's the first thing that serpent seed line went back to, is basically, you know, killing, robbing, raping, all the rest. But my point is that I think he was told, look, our information is that when Jesus went down to Hades, he made this crazy promise to all these people down there that they're all going to get a straight up second chance, that each one was going to give a chance to live, to be conscious, to get to the point to where they would have a chance to accept by faith of salvation through Jesus Christ as a way back to God. And I'm sure Satan said, what? He goes, yeah, you released them all the ones you captured. He's now going to release them. And he's promised them all, they're all going to get a chance to live long enough to get it, you know, to accept them, to accept the gospel. And I'm sure Satan says, well, is that right? So they're all supposed to get a chance. Well. Have I got abortions for them? They're not even going to get a chance. I got nothing but wars. I got nothing but fake Islamic religions. I got Taoism. In fact, you're going to find out about Buddhism. It's not that old. You're going to find out about Chinese kingdoms. They're not that old. You're going to find out Hinduism was actually a corruption. You're going to find out all of a sudden there's all kinds of strategies that he employed that once he was released. But the biggest thing is, don't let them live long enough, or at least in a culture to where they can actually get a chance to get saved. I'm not going to lose them again. I got them one time. I'm going to keep them. So go ahead, Paul, before I jump into the next little bit.
Yeah, again, it's you paint a very colourful picture, and I'm enjoying this level of theorizing and speculating. This is exactly what I got into the game for, to be honest, because I love this kind of stuff. And yeah, I imagine that's exactly how Satan would have reacted once he heard the news, the good news, you know, for us, and bad news for him type of situation. That all of his hard work was completely undone. And now he has to kind of start from scratch and do it all over again. And you know, if you look at the evidences on the earth for complete and total destruction, I mean, first of all, I'm sure Armageddon was pretty destructive. we can equate a lot of the destruction we see of like melted buildings, for example, and mountain ranges that were clearly once castles or something. We can equate a lot of that to the Armageddon and the judgment of God and Jesus and during the tribulation time. I mean, we even have evidences, Joe, showing that the seven churches that Jesus was explaining the judgment's going to come to them. We can show evidences that these churches are razed to the ground. Their judgment came. Prophecies were already fulfilled, and a lot of people say they're still waiting for that, but there's no evidence. The evidence is there that those churches were destroyed. So first of all, I think, like I said, there was a leveling of the old world, a building of a brand new, perfect infrastructure world for billions of people to live in, due to this promise Christ made to people in Sheol that you'll be resurrected and given a chance. And yeah, when I'm sure from Satan's point of view, it may have been a blink of an eye when he was cast away, and he probably was brought back into a world bewildered, like I've been gone for a minute and everything's changed. What's going on here? Everything I've worked for has been completely undone, and yeah, and I can see it going on exactly how you've said. And if you look at Siberia, and I made an episode about this, but yeah, Siberia is just the northern hemisphere of that huge swath of land. It's a wasteland. It's been utterly decimated. It looks like you said, it's been carpet bombed for 2,000 miles straight. And it's just holes after hole after hole after hole after hole, just filled with water. Hundreds and thousands, and just an unprecedented amount of craters up there. It's been annihilated, utterly wiped off the face of the earth. But you look at these old maps, which supposedly aren't even that old, which maybe a few hundred years old. That place is fully populated. And it shows like little buildings and kingdoms and churches painted on these old maps that fill this whole northern Siberian area out, from the tip all the way up to Alaska, all the way across to where Russia is. It's kitted out with civilization on all these old maps. Where did that go? It's just gone. Just look at Google Maps and you'll see there's nothing there. It's complete and total tundra. It's wasteland.
Yeah.
And that alone is a testament that something happened not that long ago, like very recently. And then that isn't even to talk about the civil wars, the wars in Europe, the wars in America. Brother against brother, just nation against nation, king against king. World War I, World War II, the destruction of Dresden and all of European beauty just destroyed in carpet bomb raids. The war has been non-stop.
That's right. That's the point. The point is the war of Gog and Magog happened right after, and so this is where I disagree with pretty much the rest of the millennial reign. Of course, I'm not a YouTuber. I just do radio once in a while over at Revolution.Radio, and even then, I'm like a rock skipping once in a while. It's got to be something really important for me to get back on the radio. So I'm kind of, like you say, semi-retired. But I will extend this to you, Paul. If people do support you and they want another session, in a couple of weeks or whatever, just give me a ring. Anything that I can do to help. In fact, I just want to say right now, I've been in talk radio for 15 years. I've been on the political front line of politics over 35 years as a not a consultant, more of as a hijacker or as a gunslinger. I was an ideologue, a free agent ideologue. But anyways, the point is that I've seen a lot of guys like you, Paul, both in the alternative media, political realm, as well as really smart guys, and then I've seen the YouTubers as well. And I can tell right now, I've seen hundreds come and go. And the reason why they come and go is nobody supports them. And I just want to encourage you to support Paul. I mean, he's doing this, it's taking his time. And so anything that you can do to help him, I'm set myself. I'm actually in my mid 60s, and I got an organic farm. There's nothing you can do, but if you wanted to do something for me, give it to Paul. Send Paul a love gift, whatever. subscribe, however. But what was my point, Paul? You were just talking about something. Oh, the other thing is that the war of Magog and Magog. Oh, about doing a session. So if you got people that want me to come back and you're giving you some support, just let me know. Give me a ring. Maybe we'll do a session 3 or whatever.
Sure.
But so this is where I disagree with you and the rest of the community, the millennial reign of community.
Go on.
This is the timeline. And this is what's going to give you guys a lot of trouble, because most of you have settled in that Satan's short season has actually started right around, some people say the 1500s, some people say the 1700s. I'm saying no. So Satan is released. All right, we got the map of the Tartarian, greater Tartarian map. In other words, worldwide, Africa, all of it. We can see all that. That was in about I-230. In fact, I'm going to come to it in my notes on this timeline. And so it didn't happen much after that. Now, we know Satan, when he comes back, he comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Nothing but wars, which has happened since he's been released. We can go back 2,000 years, let's just say. All right. This is what I believe. And then also he changes times, dates, seasons. Yeah. That's his other calling card. That's his other big calling card. And then one other thing that you brought up about people believing that, oh, no, the 1,000-year reign of Christ has not come yet. We're waiting for the book of Revelations to be fulfilled. And then Christ is going to come back. He's going to clean up the earth and right it. And they're going to have this 1,000 years. Think about it. It would take Christ, even Christ himself, 1,000 years to clean up the polluted soil, water, nuclear power plants, the trashed up oceans that's got plastic the size of Texas floating in it off the coast of Hawaii, all the dirty water, all the dumps, the radioactive, the nuclear power plants. Think about it. It would take them 1,000 years just to clean this place up. We have trashed this place so bad. I mean, it's like you can't, even in the Northwest now, you think, oh, I can go back to the mountains and I can drink. Yeah, I'm close enough. I'm in the foothills. Maybe if I went over a mountain range or a set of the hills, I could probably drink out of the water. That would be okay. But every place else on the world, bad water. They've sprayed the skies. The soils are trashed up with aluminum baryonate. In order for Christ and his 1,000-year kingdom to come back and clean this world up, it would take them 1,000 years just to clean it up. Just the dumps alone. But anyways, let's get to the timelines, because this is my timeline, Paul. 1,000 years came. Satan was released. He said to himself, you know what? I can make this work. I can make them I'll infiltrate the Catholic Church. It'll be the Holy Roman Catholic Church. I can get in it. I can make people think that these buildings were built by the Romans and the Greeks and the Greco-Roman and the pyramid and the Parthenon of Greek. I can sell it. I can get it. I can infiltrate the church. I've got my secret society set up. And so I'm going to cancel that 2,000 years like it's never. And then I'm going to pick it up from there. And so then you start to get into the actual real timelines of what they tell us. And here they are. So first off, you got the church fathers, supposedly 160 AD to 350 type AD, all of the big church fathers. And I can go through the names: Hippopotamus, Hippos, Origen. With almost all of them acknowledge that the 1,000-year reign of Christ had come and gone. What happened after Satan was released? There was some kind of worldwide rocking event that knocked the whole earth back and caused devastation everywhere. It took a couple hundred years for mankind and civilization to actually get back on their feet after that 1,000-year reign. So something happened. So for 100, 200 years, they were knocked back. But then when they finally started to pull themselves together and they started thinking, and then the church fathers started writing what doctrines are, then they says, you know what? We've been so devastated. We got to collect up. What what did the scripture say, and what did Peter say, and who Paul wrote these epistles. We need to pull these together. And so the church fathers were part of those that were putting that all together, although they all acknowledged. Then we get to the timelines, the Council of Nicaea, 325 AD. And that's where all of the Christians and the church, and even the ones that had infiltrated, to see, yeah, Christ's kingdom we're just starting into it. It's AD 160, or it's AD 325, or everything's with an I, an X, or a J before that. Even the maps, even our Tatarian map of Siberia that you saw, that's I 290, I think it is. I'll hit up my notes. So the Council of Nicaea, then, so they're pulling all the information together. They're getting the canon and everything else. They're getting New Testament together. And then 393 AD, they approve the canon. And so finally the Christians got back on their feet after this devastation, whatever. And so now they're getting along 93 AD. But this is the timeline. This is what they tell us. And then in 260, which is about 100 or so years before that, maybe 100 or so, we had the plague of Rome. And then 410, this is what we're told, 410 AD, we had the fall of Rome by the Huns and the Visigoths and the artilleries or whatever. That's what we're told. And then we're told 429 to 530 had the plague of Justin, the pandemic, which affected the whole known world. A lot of people died in that. And then, of course, I talked about right after the 1,000-year reign, the earth was ripped up, but there was also a plague, supposedly at 166 to 180. That was a plague. And then we get into, now, here's something that's interesting. They say the Great Wall of China was started to be built 246 BC to 620 AD, or it took 1,866 years. Well, this guy, this Russian mathematician, and I'll get to his little card, he goes, oh, that's a bunch of crap. Took 1,800 years to build that wall. In fact, he goes on to say it's the Jesuits in the 15th and the Catholics. He says the Jesuits and the Catholics have doctored and changed all historical documents and data for the last 900 years. He says they had whole offices set up in which these Jesuits and these Catholics went back throughout the last 1,000 years, just changing everything. But anyway, so you got that wall, okay, and of course you got the worst year supposedly in history, which was 536 to 542. So what I'm painting a picture, Paul, is that not 50 or 60 years goes by in which things aren't breaking down. There's not a plague. There's not. We're into the season of Satan. This war of Gog and Magog, it's taking lots of different forms. Of course, 1066, we finally get the banking. Then we get the first open secret society, 1099, the Knights Templar. All right. Now, supposedly they tell us that Islam came along about 573, I think. No, 570, Muhammad was born. And then by 622, Muhammad established Medina. And now we're finding out Medina is not on any of the maps until about the 8th century. Muhammad is not even mentioned until the writings of these Islamic scholars in the 8th century. In fact, the coins that actually say Muhammad, which means the chosen one or the blessed one, it's actually a name. Muhammad is actually a name, came out of the Middle East, these minted coins. And they were also close in the 7th and 8th century, these couple of coins. Well, guess what they show? They show Muhammad, and he's holding a staff, and on either side of him, crosses with Islamic writing. So the actual first coins of Muhammad, or that would become the Islamic Empire, it got crosses all over them, front and back. It's absolutely unbelievable. So Anyways, but that would be what Satan would do after the devastation. Figure right around 600 AD. Let's give them another religion, which some people are now saying that Islam, the 5 prayers a day, was actually because the Catholic Church was corrupting true Christianity, and that Islam was actually an offshoot of true Christianity to reform it, to bring it back to the days on how it was during the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Why can't we pray 5 times a day with all the bells and everything else, which, by the way, bells were everywhere? Then they outlawed those in the 1800s. You can see miles and miles of nothing but bells. It seems like when you heard the bell, that was time to actually stop, to center yourself in the 1,000-year reign of Christ, and to worship like the Muslims do now, which would be, I'd like to see it as a great practice. Too bad Christianity is not like that, where, you stop 5 times a day and you go, wait a minute, what am I living for? Maybe I do need to break a little prayer rug and pray. So maybe Islam was a reform of it, and then the Mohammedans, they say, took it over. Lots of evidence for that. Okay, then you had the Knights Templar, and they really got going 1119 to year 1300, 1307. And they were like the first one of the secret societies, and they really got going. And now we know a little bit about them. And of course, we had the Crusades. It's give or take 1095 to they stopped right about the 15th century. And in fact, that's where I found out that walls work. When I realized all of the wars, when I went through all the wars in the first 1,000 years, from the year first century to the year 1,000, all of the wars and the walls. Okay, then we get to another guy that pops up. So you got the Crusades around the 11th century that were just like massive wars between the Moors and Muslims or whatever. And what were they fighting over? They all got tricked. They thought New Jerusalem, or they thought Jerusalem was in the Holy Land. No, Jerusalem was at the North Pole. Tricked all these Christians into believing we got to fight for the holy Jerusalem, when no, that place was cursed. That was left. That was gone. And all of a sudden we got tricked into believing, we got to fight, keep back the Muslims to keep them from the Holy Land, New Jerusalem, when New Jerusalem was got us to fight over daggone dirt. Unbelievable. But then we had the rise of Genghis Khan. And all of a sudden, this guy pops up 1162. So think about it. We had the Tartarian map at I-290. Something happened to where that was basically wiped out. But then we got, and so hundreds of years goes by in which this guy, Genghis Khan, and these Mongols, after the devastation, think about it, that Siberia got devastated. They weren't walking around in nice cities anymore. You had large groups of people. They were now almost 1,000 years away from the actual 1,000-year reign of Christ. The cities in the north like that were devastated. They were wandering, hordes of them, called Genghis Khan. And then, so after 1,000 years, you take a look at the Tartarian maps, then the vast horde of Genghis Khan invades Europe. And then we got all those wars from 1862 to 1227, and then all the Khans after that, all of his family, wars in China. There was no empire in China. In fact, Genghis Khan actually pulled together the Chinese as little as 1,000 years ago, where they were actually able to form their first. So I'm painting a picture, Paul, that no, the little season of Satan actually started right after the 1,000-year reign of Christ. There was a bump 200-300 years, world was devastated, and then they picked it up, and then they tried to cover it up by putting all these fake dates, saying it's 1234, the first coin that was minted, or 1204 out of Denmark, which had a mitre on one side, it was a gold coin, and a crown on the other. And so Satan was actually trying to trick us with the dating. He was actually trying to trick us with the money, the dating of the books, the maps, all of it. If you actually take a look at it, it's actually I and J. So, but they were trying to make us think, this is the year of our Lord, 1234. No, it was actually the year of Yeshishis or ISIS,
Mm-hmm.
not ISIS, 234. So, anyways, we had Genghis Khan, the religious wars, which, by the way, you actually take a look, and here's the residual effects. This is the power, the residual effects of Christ's church during this 1,000-year reign. Absolutely incredible. Not only did it carry through, not only to the Catholic Church and to spread all over the world, but Genghis Khan, this is what his faith was, Paul. This is real close to Christianity. Genghis Khan and those people, they believed in a sky father who was a universal judge. He was eternal and supreme. And if you broke the laws of the universe, then he would cause, the sky father would cause chaos and judgment, and that he would send a person on the earth to extract basically judgment for doing wrong. Genghis Khan basically was reciting our construct of of Christianity about a father eternal, and that ultimately he sends somebody that would evoke judgment. So then we keep on going, Paul. Now we're up to something really strange. It gets stranger. Have you heard of the Ice Age, the Little Ice Age?
Mm-hmm.
The Little Ice Age happened in the 13th century.
Yeah, the rings on trees show that there was something happening around that time. Yeah, there's evidences through that to say it seems like everything was terrible during that period of time again. I've always equated, the worst year on history, the 536, to be the same event. But they've separated obviously by about 800 years or so by the official records. But
Yeah,
I think it's the same event personally.
yeah, and that's why, even though I'm reading off the conventional timeline of what the other people tell us, there was a conventional timeline history tells you, I'm believing like you that it's jumbled.
Yeah.
536 to 537, who knows? That could have been right after the 1,000-year reign of Christ that all hell broke loose, because Satan does change times and seasons or whatever. But this little ice age happened in the 13th year, and that's when I believe, because we now know that we have the maps of the cities in Antarctica and all the rest. I believe that's when the Earth was actually frozen, and that's when the Arctic was actually frozen. So that's something else we've been lying about. That's what, in fact, there was 3 other ice ages, and so yeah, and then we got other weird things like the Tartarian Empire. They decided to attack Japan, to conquer Japan in 1380, and they say they ended up crashing into Peru, and that's why they built out all the glorious buildings and everything in Peru, which I don't believe that at all. And then we had another big bump in the road, 1346, the bubonic plague.
Mm-hmm.
That hit us. That really knocked us back. That was called the Black Death, and it happened a couple of places. I mean, it happened a couple of periods of time, but the main one that like wiped out 50 million dead in Europe was 1346 to 1353. And then we get to so this guy was king of Russia, and his name was Muhammad II in 1475, but he wasn't Muslim. But he viewed Islam as an offshoot of Nestorian Christianity, which was it was an offshoot of 1400 AD. So to believe that actually Islam was actually an offshoot of Christianity is something else. Also, China and the Qing, Ching, that's when the first Chinese empire came into being, 645. So all that was long. By the way, the writings about Siddhartha and Buddha, 500 AD, before that showed up. Just lies everywhere. We're finding out all of our timeline's crazy. Okay, so the next thing, then we get into the 15th century, then all the secret societies, which, by the way, there was a secret society, and I will hit this here in a minute, that actually did manuscripts Scalloway. I'll have to get his name. But the Jesuits had whole thousands of people working on old world manuscripts, historical documents, and like this Russian mathematician. I'll find his card here in a minute. He goes back and he goes, they just made it up all the
Yeah, it's
last 900 years.
Anatoly Fomenko.
That's it. That's the guy. He says they made it all up. He went back and did his own timeline. Did you know there wasn't even a written language in Russia until like the 8th century? So, but here's another one. 1793, France throws out the church, Christianity, basically start killing the Huguenots. I mean, you start to get all of the killing. And then let me just check here. I will hit this, although this is a little later, and then I am getting close to the wrapping it up. But well, there's still 15 minutes or so, maybe a little more. So the big orphan trains that everybody see. What I'm trying to do, Paul, I'm being very mischievous. Say the word.
Mischievous.
Mischievous, right? It's because I'm trying to knock you. I'm trying to create a civil war among us, the 1,000-year millennium, because a lot of you guys believe that it just happened in the last couple hundred years, and I'm saying,
I'll stop you right there. First of all, I don't have a timeline personally. I've heard quite a lot of differing opinions. I quite often say the 1776 thing just because it's something people can pull on as an example. Okay, let's say it was 250 years ago, for example, in 1776. But from what I've gathered and looked into, I don't think the timeline we can go off is at all accurate in any way, shape, or form. I don't think we actually know how long it's been since Christ's death and resurrection. You know, we say 2,000 years. It could have been 1,000 years ago. It could have been maybe, I don't know, 1,300 years ago.
yeah. But here's the problem, Paul. If you go off the 250 timeline, like 1750, which by the way, I'm going to get into that because that is important, because that is when the whole world, that was literally the first world war that actually started in 1750.
Yeah.
But if you go, you got to believe that Islam then came about, because if Christ's kingdom was over around the 15th, 16th, then that means all of Islam had to come in the last couple hundred years. That means Genghis Khan. That means all these Black Deaths. That means you got to condense almost 1,500 years of history, of conventional history, which I granted, they got a lot of stuff messed up, but to condense all of that in like the last couple of hundred years, it's just not doable.
No.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I'm not. They call it revisionist history, don't they? Where you just revise everything and throw it all out the window. And I'm not there for that. The issue, I think, because it's known as the little season or the short season, as you said, it's just a time. You know, people imagine it. Well, it can't be any longer than 250 years because obviously, if 1,000 years is Christ's reign, then a season is a quarter of that, so it must be 250 years. But I've always said that's just a random number you've just pulled out your ass there. There's no reason why it should only be 250 years old. It could be any period of time. How long's a piece of string? If you want to know how long a short season is, it's as long as it takes to get that army together, that Gog and Magog, and surround the camp of saints. That could take as long as it takes, and we don't actually know how long a short season really is. And you know, from the perspective of God, I mean, 1,000 years is nothing. You know, that is a short time. It's a day. You know, so a short season could literally be we don't know 1,000, 1,500 years, as you're explaining here. And from what you're telling me, it seems like you're saying Christ reigned for 1,000 years from what we conventionally call 70 AD, which was the destruction of Jerusalem. And then once that was ended,
it was canceled by Satan. Satan canceled it.
Yeah.
He picked it back up. He picked up the Roman Catholic Church, all of the history. He said the buildings were built by the Romans and the Greek. They built the aqueducts and all the rest of it. Bull crap.
So, but just to clarify, you're saying then only after the 1,000-year reign had ended did the church fathers appear, is what you're saying?
Yeah, that's according to history, and they all acknowledged that the 1,000-year reign of Christ had come.
Yeah,
and I've got the church fathers right here. Let me just pull this out. So here are these people, and I'm not going to say the names right, but Polyclops, 110 AD. Uh,
Polycarp, is it Polycarp?
right.
Yeah.
Justin Martyr, 150 A.D. He said the Jews had changed the Septuagint. The Jews teach. They took away many of the uh, scriptures, and they were changing stuff. Uh, and changed the translation from 70 elders in 240 BC. But he said it. Here's another one. Hippocalypse, 2005. He also said they changed scriptures. He also believed that their early church came. Now, the Nicene Creed, some people believe that the Jesuits actually added that thy kingdom come, or that whatever, or Nicene Creed.
Mm-hmm.
Origen, he was 240 AD. He was arguing with at the time with, I guess, the resurgence of the Jewish people at the time, that that changed scriptures, and that Christ's kingdom have come. Eusebius, 300 AD. Christ ruled over all the nations, quote unquote. Let's see. Book of the Martyrs. They acknowledged it. There's other things like the Geneva Bible of 1532
Yeah.
in the commentary on Luke. They said Christ's 1,000-year kingdom would come. So they were all in on it, Paul. They were all, but they were the last ones to believe it. And so you ask, well, what happened? What ruptured Christianity, which could derail it? And now I'm going to jump just a little bit ahead in my notes, because this is pretty important. But I am going to jump back real quick. But I have to go to this, because this is well, let me stick to where I'm at right now. So where was I?
Well,
Oh,
just to talk about the church fathers, someone did ask a decent enough relevant question here. Obviously, we have the Orthodox Church as well, which went out into Russia, which is obviously a breakaway from the Catholic Church. It's not the same thing.
yeah, get
And
the Byzantine Empire for 1,000 years, right?
absolutely, yeah. So what do you think all that kind of fits into all of this and that concept of the Orthodox Church?
I think that's the residual. I think the power of Christ's church was so powerful that when it actually ended, and we had this rupture event before we start to pick up along the conventional timeline of history, I think the church was so powerful that it just bust right on through, and it was shining out everywhere. And Satan's main thing to do was, number one, start wars, take advantage of the power vacuum, get one king to go after another king, start all these little kingdoms and all these little castles, and which made it hard to kill men creatures, by the way. In other words, preserve life, all those walls. So Christ knew what he was doing. He goes, you know what? When I leave, these men creatures, they're so damn selfish, they're so greedy that Satan's going to have an easy time getting inside their head, especially when they're not acquainted with sin for like 1,000 years. Sin is almost be like a virus. I'm going to get inside their head. Yeah, you can have your neighbor's wife. Lying ain't so bad. Well, why shouldn't I have his castle over there? I'm bigger than he is. So anyway, so that havoc started. And so these church fathers were all trying to pull together that initial havoc right after it. And then that's where you get the church fathers. That's where you get it. So you say, well, what happened? Well, something really weird happened right after the church fathers, right around 500 AD, when all this other havoc was happening. Guess what? All of a sudden we start finding out the catacombs, millions and millions of skull and bones all over the earth, Paul, all buried under all these great cathedrals. There's over 6 million just under Paris. I'm talking about skulls, bones. They are in Peru. They are in Crimea, like where they're having war right now, under that church. There's a great church in the middle of an island that doesn't even make any sense. A grand cathedral structure I don't know if it's Malta or I don't know what it's called, underneath catacombs. San Francisco, catacombs of the dead. Iowa, skull, bones. Did Satan go on a killing like a lot of you guys believe that the insane asylums were the people who used to remember what happened that Christ and they put them away? I'm saying no. The catacombs were. That was the great genocide, leading a nice little Christian family down. Oh, let's take a tour of the underneath the catacombs, and you got the Satanists that are actually Catholic priests. Go ahead and kill them, cut their bones up, feed them to the rats. We'll stack them up here. And so why? Where did all of these millions and millions of skulls worldwide end up under these beautiful cathedrals and churches underneath these secret dugout tunnels underneath Paris, Crimea? They're all over.
So you're saying basically, once the
slaughter, right?
Once the Millennial reign ended, there was just a mass slaughter of anybody who did during that time, and all the remains were put underneath in kind of like a middle fingers fashion. Let's put them under the precious churches that they built.
That's right. Once Satan got going, and once he got into that church, once he got his pastors and his bishops in place, he says, "Tell me the people that are really holy." Tell me the 16-year-old girl that just loves to come to confession or praise, or she still prays 5 times a day. Tell me about that family that really, really, really loves the Lord. And his grandfather told him about, what the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And then let's give them a little tour underneath the church. Special blessings from the Lord God. You know how they all talk, right? All these TV preachers and serpent-tongued people, and I think there was a genocide, kill off all these people, and I think that's what the catacombs were. That was the kill off. And as far as the timeline in which everybody points to now, and this is the rift I have with them, 1750. If anybody takes a look at that, there was actually a nation called the Holy Roman Empire. It was called the 7 Years' War. Paris went at it. Napoleon Bonaparte, the 1800s, they went to Russia. Russia was burned. City after city was burned. It was incredible. Nothing but wars all over the place. Of course, we had our own war, 1776, here in the United States. But what most people don't know is there was wars all over. And there continue to be wars all the way up until the First World War. And so everybody goes, well, it's the orphan trains. And look at all the people that they put in the mental institutions and the hospitals. What I believe, Paul, is that, again, it was a massive attack against the church. You have to look no further than there was massive wars for those 200 years. And part of the thing is a lot of people were saying, where did that building come from? Or like a guy from the South out of the Civil War went to New York and saying, wait a minute. We had buildings like this in Charleston, South Carolina. Where were these built? But there was a little thing that happened during that period of time. And they were called, and this is your neck of the woods, Paul. In fact, probably down the street from where you're at, you can see one of these buildings now. They were called the welfare houses or the workhouses.
Yeah.
And they were all over. They put old men in there. They put women. Did you know that the welfare, did you know there was no welfare program in the poor houses of Europe? If you were a woman and your man was killed in a war or somehow, not only could you not find work, or maybe you could become a prostitute. There was no real jobs for women. But if you couldn't take care of your children, they took them. And they put them in massive orphanages of the same old buildings called foundlings. Foundlings were like we found a child. And all over, they took these children from their mothers. They put them in factories. They worked them to death all throughout the 17th, 18th, 19th century. If you were a woman and you could not support your children, they were taken away from you. You were put, if you bucked up or if you fought about it, you were thrown in an insane asylum, or you were thrown. It was the harvesting and the resetting of all these children, of all these people who were saying, wait a minute, what's going on? What is about all these buildings? And of course, you had all the revival that was happening. Did you know in these workhouses that once you ended up in a workhouse, Paul, it doesn't matter if you were a young man or an old man or a woman, you were given a uniform and you weren't allowed outside. Now, in the States, we call it the county. What's your political geographical district there in England? You got another a shire? What do you call your district?
Okay, no, yeah. So we have numerous little um counties, we call them. I'm in Lancashire, just next to Yorkshire and Lancaster. There's Manchester as well, which is its own county. But there's quite a lot. There's a lot of them. And even then they're then broken up into councils, which have their own personal council, which is either left or right. It's really silly and complicated and convoluted and stupid, to be honest. But yeah, in terms of counties, I'm in Lancashire myself, and there was a War of the Roses between Lancaster and Lancashire, which, historically speaking, I may have to go look back and look at now in light of all of this. But go ahead, sorry, I'll let you carry on.
Yeah, yeah. So you had to wear a certain uniform and a patch, and you weren't allowed. That was your clothing, and you weren't allowed to get another job in another county. In other words, you just couldn't wander off. Like, I grew up in America where you could stick your thumb out. In fact, I hitchhiked at 13, 14 years old, up and down the East Coast as a, I guess I would be considered an orphan. But yeah, so that's where I believe all the orphan trains came from, where they were just basically selling their children, and they were taking the children from the parents. They were busting up the families. I think it was just like a full-scale attack. They had no welfare. They had no checks. If a woman needed food or whatever, then she had to go to a workhouse, and she had to give up her children. And, of course, they also paying women for their babies, too. And then I heard that some of the Luciferians were actually had brood moms, in which these Luciferians, or these serpent seed line, were getting women pregnant just so they could sacrifice their children.
Yeah.
But this is when we get into the whole serpent seed line or the secret societies. These are what really start to happen right around the 15th century. And see, this is why I stick to a more conventional, because this is when they really got into everything. I mean, they got into the books. There was a society in Paul in the turn of the 15th century in Italy that did nothing but make statutes for churches. Did you know that? They made gargoyles, they made statutes, and all over the world, from Rome, from the Pope himself, he sent you statutes of Mary and statutes of everything. And they go, well, you put gargoyles because the gargoyles are on the outside of the church. And so they made statutes to put on the outside of their church. That's a gargoyle. That's what's on the outside. Oh, the Pope said that's okay. But statutes. Not only that, they had places where all the documents, the Jesuits went through. They had that. They had people changing the maps, changing all that. So if you can think about what Google is doing now, just electronically, think how much easier it would have been if you only had, you got to remember, here's another crazy thing, real quick. So, yeah. So the first book, this is what they tell us, right? They really want us to believe this, right? They just shovel this stuff right to us. So the first book ever printed was printed in, guess, Paul.
I don't know. Throw it out there. In the UK?
About 15, right? Yeah. No, the first book was printed in 1493.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I thought you meant location. Sorry, yeah, in the time it was around that.
Right,
yeah. Okay.
Right. We know what that's telling you. That's telling you that they didn't have manuscripts. That's telling you that's the reason why they did have an actual dark age, not teaching anybody to read. They could have manipulated history really, really easily. They had handwritten manuscripts running around saying this and saying that. I'm not even sure if the church fathers, outside of, I'm seeing some of the writings and some of it's kind of really deep spiritually, like Augustus and that type of thing. And so, okay, maybe they lived, maybe they really did write the stuff, but I haven't been able to see it. So you're dealing with these secret societies that came along. And of course, you got the black nobility. They came along in the 1300s. The Rosicrucians, they popped up. 1407, like 8 doctors. And then they had their manifestos in 1610, 1615. Then you had the rural societies. Now these societies are really becoming hot and heavy, right? I mean, they're really coming on. Then you had the Jesuits. And here's that guy, Antonio Fomenko. Here it is.
Fomenko, yeah.
Fomenko, right. This is what he says, quote, "The Jesuits have fabricated," oh, I was wrong. I said 900 years. "The Jesuits fabricated the history of the last 1100 years since the early 15th, 16th, 17th century." And he wrote the book, History, Fiction or Science. Yeah. Jesuits and Catholic. They released, quote unquote, the real here's one. You're going to love this one, Paul, because you're a Protestant. So the Protestants, Martin Luther, they were really getting going around the 15th century. Well, this is wondrous. So there was a line of thinking among popetry, and the Pope was the Antichrist of the book of Revelation. And so the Protestants and Martin Luther and the Calvinists, they were really cracking into the Catholic Church. I mean, the Catholic Church was burning them at the stake. Get a hold of it, Protestants. Of course, the Jesuits rose up to be the enforcement arm. So anyways, as the Protestants are really cracking into the Pope, of course, the Catholic Church was pretty corrupt by then. They were saying the Pope is the Antichrist. Well, guess they finally come up with a defense to defeat that the Pope is not the Antichrist. And it was the Jesuits and the Catholics themselves. And they did this only for a couple of years until somebody says, you can't do that. And this was the defense of the Jesuits and the Catholics when the Protestants were claiming that the Pope was the Antichrist of the book of Revelation. And he was bringing in the beast, the same stuff that we hear now. They released, quote unquote, the real information that Christ's 1,000-year reign had come and gone. And that the claim of the Protestant that the Pope was actually the Antichrist is wrong, because the book of Revelation was fulfilled.
Well, this is the thing. A lot of people say, oh, well, this theory that preterism is obviously...
right, they got it from that.
It's created by a Jesuit in like that time period. And it's like, well, no, it wasn't created by a Jesuit in that time period. It was used as a ploy, like you said, to take the heat off of the Catholic Church at the time. But they didn't invent the concept of Christ had already reigned. That wasn't their invention necessarily, but it seems like it was like a formalized belief system after that, which you call preterism once they did all that. But yeah, I've heard that story before, and it's a fascinating one, isn't it? Absolutely.
Oh yeah. They actually used the real truth to try to stop it until somebody started thinking about it and goes, wait a minute, we can't have them believe that. But also you have, now this is what the secret societies and all these different groups, you had this one guy, he had thousands of translators in the 15th century. And he was a Jesuit, and his name was Joflatus, and his last name is Scaligen, and he was nicknamed Scalawag. There was a nickname, and they were called Scalawags. And he ran these thousands of these translators they were Jesuits that did nothing to go back and to document and copy and retranslate old scriptures and writings of Cicero and any kind of old writings or whatever. But that was the arm. That would be the Google of that day. They could have done anything during that period of time.
Yeah. Well, one
Yeah,
thing, you go back in there to also Anatoly Fomenko's work, where he's saying, they basically messed up 1,100 years worth of history. They've completely jumbled dates together, made different events separate events. The same event separated into numerous events, and stretched that period of time out. So it's implying, what he's saying there is, so we have a documented history of, let's say, 2,000 years since Christ. Okay. Never mind his millennial reign. Let's say 2,000 years since Christ was crucified. That's what we say, isn't it? And then resurrected. So 2,000 years. But what Anatoly Fomenko's saying, no, it's only been about 1,000 years. It's only been about 1,000 years since that event happened. So if you're here talking about all these historical events that have happened over the past 2,000 years, it may have actually, all of that may have only happened in 1,000 year period. And 1,000 years has been slapped onto our history that doesn't really exist, is kind of what he's saying. And maybe there is something to that, maybe there isn't. I just thought I'd clarify that point there because it is an interesting take on it all. That we aren't actually that far out from when the reign ended. If you're claiming the reign ended, you know, literally in what we call 70 AD. That's when it began and ended, historically speaking, for us. 1,000 years,
right, right.
a thousand year happened, but it's just not talked about. It's as though the clock just carried on. Is how it's been portrayed. You know what I mean? So there is a
Right.
1,000 years of time, but it did happen, but it's just not been added to our history technically, and this is where it gets very convoluted and confusing when you start
Yeah.
looking
So
into
what I'm
the timeline
saying, and
mess
this
up.
will, yeah, what I'm basically saying is, so instead of saying that we're living in the year 2024, we
Mm-hmm.
could very well be living in the year 3034, and that this 2,000 years, where that was Satan's little season,
Mm-hmm.
2,000 years compared to man 7,000, is a little season or a little period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, just to let me rip through these real quick, because I know we're coming up to like 3 hours and you're going to lose people after 3 hours. So I hit the orphan trains about the poorhouses and the harvesting of children. Oh, about the ice age. That's when I think the Arctic was frozen over, because we had maps before that that actually showed Antarctica that did not have ice.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so that's when it froze up. And then there was three more of these sort of mini ice ages. 1650, another year, which no summer. 1770, and then 1850 was also the thing there. Also, the airships, I actually believe, was a technology developed not during the reign of Christ, but just like we have developed the combustion engine, I think they developed it, and it was another one of these mistakes they made. Wait a minute. No, we can't get them to do that. Let's get them in planes. Let's get them in trains. Let's make them need where they need oil and combustion engines to work off of. Let's get rid of the electric cars. But they had come up with that themselves. So, and then another thing is, I told you about, there was a whole society in Italy, 15th century, that did nothing but marble structures. Which the other thing is, when you take a look at all the marble structures that you see, the one thing you don't see, and this guy makes a really good point, is that why are there no marble veins? Whenever you work with marble, there's always a dark vein. How can you have these perfect figures of these marble figures and they got no dark marble veins to them? And he wants to say that they're actually, he goes so far as like 3D printed or, whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
And then let me just hit you with this, Paul. Also, here's the other big. So they've sent forth a champion against people like you and against the rest of the millennial reign type of uh, conspiratorial people. And
Mm-hmm.
this is like the mainline alternative media. In fact, I sent you a link. I think the movie's called The Old World. And it's Stu Peters and Martin Lycan and the secular side. They're trying to explain all these old buildings and they're trying to explain the old world. And they're doing it in the secular fashion. And they're basically attacking it. And one of the things they attack are the doors. And so they go, why have 20, 30-foot doors,
Mm-hmm.
for the little people? And so they want to allude to there was another ancient society that was high tech, not Christian, but it was like an Atlantean type of evolved secular society at the time, in which there could have been giants. And they, by our own, we secular, we built it. Has nothing to do with the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And they made this movie called The Old World.
Yeah.
Stu Peters. I don't know if you saw it.
I have heard about it. It's quite a buzz right now. People are talking about it. It does seem like the Tartarian faction has, created their documentary, and
Yeah.
they never seem to want to talk about the millennial reign of Christ. Some
Yeah.
have, albeit surface level, trivial levels of discussing it, not really going deep into the concept, because I don't think obviously it just because we're talking about Christ here doesn't mean they're suddenly going to convert to Christianity. And the thing is, I've always asked the question of how can you sincerely research that topic of Tartaria and not have come to this conclusion? It's kind of my argument. But I hear, but at the same time, I think the Tartarian researchers have done a fantastic job in compiling all of the visual evidences for the advanced civilization. So I don't disparage their work. I think they have a place, and I'm thankful for all the images and time and effort they've put into researching the history in the past and what we can gather and find. What obviously researchers like myself are doing is contextualizing their research through the lens of the millennial reign of Christ already happening, and it seems to fit, but I don't see, I can't imagine them suddenly converting to Christianity anytime soon. So they are certainly trying to explain all of this without Christ, and it does end up going to giants, Nephilim, or demonic advanced Atlantean civilizations, and it basically starts veering off all of the usual New Age concepts as well. Start to get involved, energy flows and all these type of things. So, but I have heard of that documentary. I haven't seen it myself. I don't think, from what I've been told, I don't think there'll be anything in the documentary that I haven't already heard before. But it does seem like a good documentary to get
Oh
people's
no, I sent it to
feet
you
wet.
because it's a twist. In other words, at least they're mounting an opposition. But so here's my opposition, and I know why they're saying the Nephilim built the buildings. Because they're otherworldly. There's like no way they know that little men creatures like us could build them, especially not with a horse and buggy. We acknowledge that, all that we acknowledge, but we're actually arguing that no, it was the Nephilim and the evolved Atlanteans that actually built it. And here's my argument: is that if you actually do take a look at Nephilim buildings, which there are some, Paul. But when you take a look at them, Jacopi, Zopepi, you know what I'm talking about. They're brutish in nature. They're crude. They're not beautiful architecture.
Yeah, Göbekli Tepe is a good example.
Right.
Yeah.
They're lumps and blocks, and they're not. No Nephilim has got the patience and the creativity. And you actually take a look at some of these buildings. The people who actually built those buildings, they built those buildings for the eyes of God. And for the eyes of Yeshua. They were, and the reason why the doors were there, probably because the glorified saints probably did have glorified bodies 20, 30 foot tall, or maybe the angels that actually fell and were actually helping out during the millennial reign. And the more I'm thinking about it, it would have taken all of those angels from the heavens. And then they returned. Once Christ returned to the North Pole, they returned to their place. And then they get a chance to watch how mankind got saved and how things play out on it. But and then the other big thing, and I got more. So, but I know we're coming up on time. The other big thing, of course, I didn't get to the coins and the maps. The last days. If you actually take a look at the scriptures, there's actually two sets of scriptures. If you take a look at the last days, all right, or the end times. And so, for instance, like in Timothy, it says, and in the last days, the boasters will come, and the blasphemers and the mockers. But if you actually take a look at what Paul is writing to Timothy, he's actually talking about the last of the last days, and like the 17 wicked sins of the last days people. They hate their mother. kill their father or whatever. It's like 17 different things.
Hmm.
Um, but that that talks about a group of people, and this is why I want to finish up on that, because once you do get a paradigm shift like I've had, and I got this revelation that literally what I'm saying, Paul, is that we're all from hell. We're like spawns of hell. We're all rotten, Paul. It turns out every single one of us, it turns out, even when I look into my precious granddaughter and my grandson, of course, I see her push them down because she wants the toy. And I'm thinking, you know what? We came out of Hades. We all were given a second chance. We're all rotten. And so, I mean, it affects your head. But when you actually take a look at the two separating scriptures of the end times, then you'll see there are two separate ones. Take a look. There's some that has to do with the book of Revelation and, the second coming and what's going to happen there and those particular judgments. But then you get, and the kingdom of heaven is like, it's like a sower went out to sow. He sent the angels. Wait a minute. He planted the wheat and the tares. And then the last thing that actually happens is Jesus sends out the angels to reap. Well, that's not talking about Christ's second kingdom. That's talking about the final reaping.
Hmm.
He's not talking about setting up 1,000-year kingdom. He's talking about the angels come out. And so you can actually find two sets of prophecies, two sets of completely different end time scriptures, some that directly apply right to the book of Revelation and those end times. But then if you take a look at all the other ones, they're all over the place too. It talks about the final judgment, the great white throne judgment, the final end, the reaping. I have them somewhere in the notes, but now everything is so jumbled,
Well,
Paul.
I've just got a theory here, but this is completely off the top of my head right now. I have nothing else to back anything I'm about to say up other than just some thoughts from my own research. I'm just going to throw this at you. But but you're saying there, this moment where the wheat and the tares exist is for this time period now, the little season, when people are being born back into the earth from Hades. This is when the wheat and the tares appear. So you get humans who are of God's creation, but are just corrupt. They're just really messed up people. The worst of the worst, bad sinners. Those
Right.
people are in Hades as well. Is it possible that in Hades were also humans who messed themselves up genetically just before the flood? Is it possible
Oh,
there are
that's your
humans,
wheelhouse. Yeah. That
like
gets into
the
Paul
mixing?
Nephilim were like clown, which by the way, I got to tell everybody, I've actually, when I was 12, maybe 13 years old, my brother turned me on to pot, and I ended up drinking what a lot of people would say ishko a while, but it wasn't that. It was actually another poison. It was Jimson weed, in which I went into a dimension where you're talking about weird
Mhm.
lizard type skin people.
Yeah.
They look like some of them had tusks like boars, werewolves. It was a completely different. It was like a realm, like if you do magic mushrooms or Iskawal or whatever, but it was Jimson weed. So yeah,
But
yeah, they could have
what
messed themselves up, Paul.
Yeah, but
And
what I'm trying to say is the Nephilim are one thing. The Nephilim are half angel, half human hybrids. When they died, they're stuck on the earth, wandering as spirits and souls. Those are the entities you see when you're taking those drugs, like ayahuasca, like you said, or Jimson weed, or any psychedelic drugs. But there's also something to account for. Just after the Nephilim died, people were left just before the flood who were humans who mixed their flesh. It was called the mixing of kinds began to happen. And these are now humans who have hybridized themselves with animals. So these aren't half angel, half human hybrids. These are humans who have changed their genetic DNA with something else in the earth, like a horse, so you get centaurs, or a fish, so you get mermaids, or a moth, so you get mothmen, or dogs, so you get dogmen, all these type of things, okay? Now these are still human. These are just humans who are corrupted, not just spiritually, but quite physically, they've corrupted themselves. Is it possible they were also in Hades? And is it possible when everyone in Hades is being released during this time, there are people walking around who have within them the soul of one of these corrupted humans who messed with their flesh once?
yeah, well,
And
absolutely. So I
yeah,
thought about that. I thought, Okay, so Christ had his 1,000-year kingdom. Well, we know about the Khazarians. We know who they are. We know that there was actually dog men,
Hmm.
um, and he didn't wipe them out.
No.
We know about the red-headed giants in North America, all kinds of articles. Why didn't he wipe those out? He seemed to let everybody live, and he set up parameters in which, this is how my kingdom is going to work. In fact, we wouldn't even have all of the races on the earth that we have.
Hmm.
We only found out uh, all of these different pockets of races um, uh, since the 1800s when we sent ships out and were colonizing every place. In fact, he left them with their own language, their own people. Somehow during the 1,000-year reign of Christ, he didn't let the different races intermix. He kept them all separate for whatever reason, but he kept them maybe just geographically. But yeah, so I asked myself, why would he do that? Why would Christ, number one, let Satan go again? Why would he let these evil people that have these genetics
Hmm.
and to back up their genetics? Here's something that Rob Skiba found out. He found that there was a study of murderers. Have you heard about this one, Paul?
Go. I can't remember. Go ahead. I do remember Rob
Okay,
Skiba's
well,
one
you're going
thing.
to like this one.
Let's go for
So,
it.
this person went into the prisons and they went to study the genetics of murderers. And this is the criteria that the people that when they went into the prison, they go, okay, you murdered, you got life in prison. Okay, did you really murder? So the people had to say, yeah, they have to confess, I really did. Look, you know, he was getting on my girlfriend and I couldn't stand it. So I did kill him. I put an axe in him. I really did murder. So they went in and they found it was a group of almost 10, 15. It was at least 10, maybe 15 of bona fide murders. Yes, we murdered. They were convicted. They had all admitted it. They all told their stories and why they did it. Some of them maybe psychopaths or whatever. They admitted it. And then they did a study of their genetics. Well, Rob Skiba found out that at a certain part in their chromosome structure, when they actually took and did the genetic test, they all had the same marker, almost like the marker of like Cain and Abel. In other words, the blood cried out from the ground,
Hmm.
but Cain received a marker in him. And so they all had the same marker that was not in people who did not murder. An incredible study. Look it up sometime. But yeah, so they went in and found out through their chromosome or their genetics that they all had this certain marker at the same spot
Hmm.
in each one of these people that had bona fide, actually murdered somebody, killed somebody. So yeah. And now the question is that why would Jesus do this? Why would Yeshua say, first off, I can understand them saving the redeemed from Hades,
Hmm.
but why make it carte blanche? Why let Satan out? Why let these evil people? Why let these people that got are of Canaanite bloodline out? Why did he let these things happen? Why didn't he wipe out all the Khazarians? He knew that they would later on go to create havoc all over the world. Why did he let this thing? Because we were evil, Paul. That's the point. The point, we had to be born in this duality. We had to have a chance to actually exercise our free will. Look, you messed up once. Now I'm going to give you a chance, but I'm going to give you a way out. It's called my blood. It's called through me. Will you take it? I'm going to give this to you. And maybe several lifetimes, which, by the way, uh, John the Baptist, Jesus straight up said, John the Baptist was the reincarnation of Elijah. And when John the Baptist was asked about it, are you Elijah? And John the Baptist says, no, he was blinded to it. And he was the greatest born among women. He goes, no, I'm not that. I'm the one that makes the way, the path straight for the way of the Lord. And then when the apostles on the transfiguration says, well, who is he? He goes, well, he's John the Baptist, plainly. That's who he is. He's Elijah. He is the one to come. And so there's precedent right there by Jesus' own words,
Hmm.
right there in it.
Well,
So
people say that Elijah didn't really die. He was taken up into heaven. So I've heard these
no,
arguments as
that's
well.
Elisha.
Is that a different one?
No, that might have been Elijah. I'm not sure.
Yes, I've heard people have given me these arguments that, well, they never actually technically died, so therefore they were never resurrected, if you get what I mean. I've heard these arguments.
Well,
Um,
he was born into another body. That's the point.
but
That's his spirit.
the idea is that the spirit can come back into another body. Yeah, and it's got even in biblical terms, the term is oikotarian. That's what they call it, a vessel for the spirit. And angels create
Oh, that's
oikotarians.
origin. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the founding father. Origin came up with
yeah,
that. Say that word again.
oikotarian.
Orchitarian. Yeah.
Oikotarian, and it's basically an avatar for angels to come to Earth in, and it's bodies, and it's about spirit coming to Earth into a vessel, which is a body. So there's no reason, and this is the thing. Another thing as well, it's kind of all things are quite literally possible through Jesus and God. Okay, so if he wants to resurrect people, it's well within his authority to do
All
so.
authority and power is
You know,
given to him.
and just because your book says, it's appointed for a man to die once and then judgment, that may be the main appointment, but he can change that at any time he wants. And it seems like he did. He seems like he went down to Hades, as you're arguing, and said, look, I'm going to give you a chance. Like, I'm making a judgment. You died once, and here's my judgment right now here in Hades. I'm going to give you another chance, but not now. In 1,000 years. I'm going to go up, like I say, I'm going to go up there, I'm going to build this place out, and you're going to come back and have a chance, because I come to save the sinners, and you are the worst. You are the sinners of the sinners. And
Yeah, nothing but
yeah,
2,000 years of war,
yeah,
bloodshed, rape, murder, robbery, deception. I mean,
hmm
take a look at our history, Paul. It's like we're all rotten. I mean, we really are.
yeah. But
And
first
that
and first and foremost, though, we're children of God, and he wants us all to come home. That's the point. Okay, so just because we're terrible with that, it doesn't mean he's not going to give us that chance, and that's what it seems like. That may be what is going on here, if this is the little season. And I think your theory, which differs from a lot of others, is that you're saying a little season isn't necessarily a short period of time. And that's, I think, what a lot of people get confused, because it's in the language, isn't it? Little season. Well, it can only
right.
be a small
Well,
amount of
I
time.
think 2,000 years compared to 7,000 years, the season of man.
Yeah.
Man has a season. Man's season 7,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
2,000 years compared to 7,000 years. That's a little. If man's season is 7, well,
Yeah.
Satan's season is 2.
Mm-hmm.
That's still a little season, but it doesn't. It doesn't even say the word season. It says time.
Yeah. Yeah, it does, but that's the problem. It's a translation and language issue, isn't it? Because we say little season, people have these assumptions in their minds of what that means. Because a season is a quarter of a year, therefore they make that arbitrary comparison to Christ's reign is 1,000 years, so it must be a quarter of 1,000 years. Therefore, it must be 250 years. But I've always said no, that does not at all mean the case. It can be as long as it takes, whatever that
Yeah,
is.
and think about
And
this, Paul. Let's say I'm
yeah.
wrong. Let's say it's 1,500 years, and the
hmm
season of man. Let's get rid of the 1,000-year reign of Christ. The season of man is only 6,000. So 1,500 years goes into 6,000 years. How many times?
hmm
4 times.
4 times. Yeah, that's
That's
right.
right. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, no, that's why.
Yep.
That's why I think I've made that argument myself. Actually, like, let's go off this to
I
times
think
by
I
six.
stole it from you.
Yeah, yeah. This is something. So I'm on board with you. I'm all up for speculating about how long it actually is. I don't know if time is short necessarily. I don't know if the little season's coming to an end either. I don't know if we don't know if this is going to keep going on and on and on until every spirit
Well,
that
Paul,
was in
listen,
Sheol has had a
I'll tell
chance.
you.
I
Right.
don't know.
This is where I get in that the war of Magog and Gog started right after, and that this war has been going on for at least 1,500, maybe 2,000 years. But what is happening in the Ukraine right now, because Russia is right next to the North Pole, we could, in fact, the Russian Orthodox Church and the Russian political leadership, believe it or not, former president, deputy of the Security Council, guess what they say? They say we are fighting against the Antichrist and the one world Luciferian beast system,
Hmm.
quote unquote. That's what they say. High up political figures, both in the Catholic government and within not the Catholic government, the Russian government, and within the Russian Orthodox Church.
Mhm.
That's what they believe. They believe they're in the war of Gog and Magog.
Yeah.
And so and now they're threatening to throw like nukes at each other. Man, this is like, and I mean, I'm all in this stuff. I'm not going to go into all that, but so Listen, I
Well,
just want to
maybe,
make
maybe,
more.
maybe that's a show for another time. Maybe we'll get into that. That does sound
Yeah.
fascinating, and I'd like to get back on to talk about the now, what's actually happening right now on Earth. And the comparisons we can make. Might be make for a really fascinating talk, actually.
Oh
So
yeah. Well,
I'm
I
all
still
for that.
got. If you only saw how many index cards more I got,
Yeah.
uh, just
Well,
oh
mate, this has been a great talk. I think people are really excited about this. I think we haven't lost a single viewer. We've got 400 people listening right now, which is amazing, and it's stayed pretty consistent and on the rise since then. So I think people have been hanging on to every word that you've been saying, and you certainly do paint a very fascinating picture here. And you've given us a lot of things to think about. Again, you've given us some quite contrary opinions to the mainline thought, if you can call it mainline thought, with the millennial reign theory, because we're all new at this. We don't really know what the mainline thought and theory of this is yet. We're just kind of
yeah.
hashing out ideas, and you've made some amazing contributions here, and I'm all for thinking and imagining about the idea that maybe the Gog Magog war is a continuous war that has been going on for over 1,000 years. And again,
It's been all war. Think about it. All
yeah.
war, all war. But
Mhm.
listen, I just want to appeal to your audience. Unless Paul's there, then you're not going to get somebody like me. I don't even have the capability to do YouTube. And so unless I get a facilitator like somebody like Paul, you're just not going to get it. It's like what I started out the program with. God whispers into the backwater and the cul-de-sacs and the nooks and crannies of the internet. That's where you're going to find real cutting edge new ideas. We may be wrong, we may not have the truth, but at least it's something new, something you're going to get. But you only to get it through somebody like a facilitator like Paul and his channel, you understanding conspiracy. And so we just want to give up. And I do have a lot more notes if you would have did. I did want to leave you this last one thing. And if you do get support and people, they really do pony up and help you out, and you want me to come back for another session, Paul, because I got lots of other cards. But let me finish with this one. A very strange scripture, in fact, two of them, right at the end of the Bible, Revelation 22:11. And this would sort of buttress or reinforce that we did come out of Hades, even the ones that came out and decided to be wicked this time around, and do all the wickedness that they're doing. It says, quote, Revelation 22:11, let him that is unjust be unjust still, and him that is filthy be filthy still, and let him that is righteous be righteous still, and he that is holy be holy still. And so it's almost like the we're coming to the conclusion in which, look, you had your second chance. Everything's played out. It's right at the end. So if this is how you're going to be right at the end, if you want to be filthy. If you're going to be holy, be holy. And then the other really strange scripture, which is like right at the end, and it's an unusual one. And it says, come, Lord Jesus, come. Throughout all the rest of the Bible, we talk about delaying time, and, the Lord tarries so that all men might be saved.
Hmm.
It talks about, the Lord tarrying, and then the early church coming to the apostles and say, where's this coming? He's supposed to come 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And then the response was that he's tarrying. He wants as many men to be saved as possible. And so, but when you get to the end of the Bible, you finally get this where the actual body of Christ, Christians, cry out and they go, you know what? We've had enough. This is enough. Come, Lord Jesus. You don't need to save any more of us. We're done. This is it. Come. And then the Bible ends there.
Hmm.
So where we actually give the Messiah the final authority, mankind actually corporately says, you know what? We're done with this. And so maybe it could be we are the ones, like Jesus said, strange scripture. Will there be faith when I come upon the earth? Will there be faith at the end? In other words, will there be any faith in the earth? Something like that. You have to
Hmm.
look it up. But Christ actually is questioning at the end, will there be any faith on the earth? And it's like we get to the end where it's so bad. And the reason why I'm making these points is that if we are of the drugs of Hades and we are circulating through, then what we're watching, Paul, we're watching us get worse and worse. And people are saying, where's the judgment? All this traineeism stuff and what they're doing with kids. God judged Sodom and Gomorrah. Why isn't fire coming down and consuming us? We are 10 times more wicked than those people. Why? Because Christ made this promise to the ones in Haiti. Look, you're going to get your chance, which means we have to go through tremendous amount of judgment, delayed judgment, in which God in future time periods, he would have squashed us in a second. He would have sent a mud flood. He would have opened up the windows of heaven. Says, I'll flood your ass. Enough of that. But what's he doing? It looks like incredible amounts of patience, because he knows the last ones are now circulating through, which, by the way, worldwide birth rate among all peoples has dropped off a cliff, literally off a cliff.
Mm-hmm.
Where actually we're now to the point where we're not climbing anymore. We go 8, 9, 10 billion people. We are now plateaued out. We are now starting to arc down as far as the amount of people dying versus the amount of people being born. Mm-hmm. So that's changed. But yeah, if you get good response, Paul, when you want to do a session 3, then I'm game. I'll have to assemble my notes. I got them all. I was going to collect them all up and stick them in a bag. Or stick them in a box and send everything to you. Trying to encourage you to do a book.
Well, yeah, you've been pushing me to do that book for a while, haven't you? Well, on the book front, I am about to publish my first book on the Nephilim clowns. I am quite literally today and yesterday I have been compiling the book into the program necessary for formatting and things like that. So it's right around the corner. Then obviously I do have part 2 to write, and then that series will be finished. And then I will have time to be writing a new book about a new subject. So maybe this will be the thing I'll summarize all my thoughts and theories on into writing form again. Sure.
Yeah,
And
just imagine the amount of information we're going to have then.
yeah.
By the way, your second book is also going to be on the demonic, dimensional dark realm too.
So the first book is called The Nephilim Look Like Clowns, The History. The second book will be The Nephilim Look Like Clowns Part 2. It's Volume 1's Volume 2, and that'll be the now. So it's about the history of where we get the clown from and the Nephilim and how it all connects. And then the second book is about how we still have ancestor spirit worship cultures today, still summoning demons using the clown costume and have been using it for quite a long time, hundreds of thousands of years. And then it talks about the mainstream media and the modern music industry and how the costume is also worn to channel demons today as well in those industries too. So that once that's done, it's done. It's basically all my videos compiled into written form is what I'm doing. The first book is about to be published in probably in the next 2 weeks. I keep setting a date. So I don't know officially, but it's literally right around the corner. I'm just gonna drop it one day. It's just gonna happen. Okay, any day now is gonna happen when I finish it. And I've got the next 2 days to work.
Can people order? Can people buy it and order it right now? Is the mechanism set up?
Not yet. So what I'm going to do is going to be on Amazon. I'm self-publishing through Amazon, and I'll set probably what I'm probably going to do is set the official sale date for like the end of the month probably. But there will be a pre-order. You can pre-order it a week before or something, as I drum up some attention that it's about to go on sale, and do some advertising. So there'll be that, but it's going to be soon, and yeah, you can buy it on Amazon. You'll be able to pre-order perhaps maybe a week before it's published. Plus, it just gives me an extra week to make sure everything's perfect with the book, before I actually release it. Even right now, I've been going through some really tedious nitpicking, editing, processing stuff, which I didn't even realize I'd have to be doing. Because once you format it into Kindle, you start seeing stuff which you can't see when you're using a word processing stuff, like formatting problems, spacing issues, things like this. Font sizes you didn't realize didn't look off when you were doing your thing, but look way off when you actually translate it. So I've had to go back and forth and translate a lot of things. Heading, it's just really. I'm doing all the tedious, boring stuff right now, but the book is written. It's fully done, and ready to go. The first volume is done. So that should be fun. And then
is the cover done?
Yeah, I've got the artwork cover. I did that months ago. I've got that's all set and ready to go and slap onto it once I've got the formatting done. So I'm literally right around the corner. I've not released any images of the book cover because I don't want to give anything away yet. You know, it's going to be a bit of a thing I'm going to start teasing once I've got the book up and ready for pre-order and things like that. So it's going to be
Well, I
right
can
around the corner.
testify as a political writer on edits. There's no end to doing edits, Paul.
No,
Uh,
I know. I'm
when
not
I
good.
made my when I made my first kill, I was an aide to the United States federal senator, United States senator. I was his liaison to the Christian conservative community at the time. Anyways, I figured out there was like some darkness that was going on in the campaign hierarchy. And so I did this open letter of resignation on issue of principle. I put like 65 edits on that thing. I mean, that thing was a blade. So when I finally released it, and I did kill the guy, if I had to do it over again, I was too purist a Christian at the time. The guy was a Christian. I shouldn't have done it, but it dethroned him from being a United States senator, and he didn't become governor, became head of some kind of Christian college or something like that. But yeah, there's no end to the edits, Paul. You got to stop.
Oh no, no.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's not like the book's written. The words are there. I'm not editing the words anymore. I don't want to overwrite the book. You know, what's said is said, and it makes sense as it is. And there's no spelling errors or anything like that anymore. The edits are coming in the formatting, trying to get it to fit into the program's format. It's really cool. It's just annoying stuff, you know. Which I didn't want. I was hoping the program would have been smart enough to do all this stuff for me. It's that kind of thing, you know what I mean? But I have to go in and manually move things around
Oh,
because
I know. You do one word on one page, and all of a sudden it comes
yeah,
out of the headers, and yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
all that stuff I'm dealing with right now, which means I am quite literally right around the corner to publishing. That's all I'm saying. And like I said, I'm going to take another year to write the second installment, and then that book series is done. That's one book finished, two books finished, which can become one solid book, you know. And then I'm probably going to move on to cause I guess I'm an author now. I guess that's what I do. You know, I'm now an author, so I'm gonna probably write more books on this topic. And if you want to send me your box of notes or send them to me, okay? And I will take them and I will read them and I will incorporate anything I can. People are always emailing me all sorts of fascinating little tidbits here and there as well, which definitely add to the whole process. This is a team effort, you know. I'm not saying I'm an expert on this. I am not. But I am certainly somebody who, like the rest of the
Well,
people
it
listening
would
here
give
today.
you, even though my handwriting's bad, I think you could make it out. You're still of a generation that can read cursive.
Yeah,
Believe
that's
it or
true.
not, they're
Yeah,
not even teaching that anymore. But anyways, it would give you some avenues that you could explore because you get a lot of good guests as far as the millennial reign that I keep up with. I mean, I'm up all over that. I mean, you do conspiracies across the board, especially now. You hit one that was near and dear to one of my sons about the parasites.
mm,
He was all in on that. That's what he believes. He believes that like that parasites have got like demons attached to the parasites' bodies, and
yeah.
that
That was
and
a
he
good.
does
That was a
he
great
does
talk.
drive
Yeah.
fast and stuff like that. Unbelievable.
Yeah, that was a great talk. I did it, yeah, a couple of days ago with Alpha Talk. Alpha Talks is the guy who did the presentation. He's the guy who's done some videos on that topic, and I was just in it to learn. Like that was a great talk, and I'm thankfully came on and did that. If no one's heard that yet, or who's listening right now, go and check out my last live video, which was again about parasites and how they seem quite literally to be physical manifestations of demons, if not simply antennae for demons, like Bluetooth for demons, they're like the physical aspect of the spiritual nature, you know, which are demonic. It's terrifying information, but so fascinating, absolutely. So anyway, hi Jacob, we're gonna leave it there. Again, we've gone for over 3 hours. We'll definitely get you back in a few weeks' time to do this again. I know people look forward to it. I look forward to it. Maybe we can get more, like I said, into the geopolitical stuff of the modern day, you know, and maybe we can make a few references to the millennial reign and see
yeah,
where it
and
all
let me
fits
leave
in.
you with this, Paul.
Go.
A new conspiracy thing that's hitting the works, and I saw it the other day, and I wasn't able to capture it. But it's 1920 or 1930 film, um, and I think it's not. Uh, it might be a silent film, it may be not, But there's people in this film, and they're spinning the globe. And as they're spinning it, somebody catches this great chunk of land between Chile and New Zealand. And so if you actually take a look at a flat Earth map, if you were to fly between the two, you would never see that. There would be nobody that would be a reason to go out. So there's this whole chunk of land that you're seeing that they're spinning this globe, and actually on this globe was this chunk of land between New Zealand and Chile. That's off to the side. So that might be one of the new big shoes to drop. That there turned out there was more land in that area that we never knew about. But yeah, thanks for having me, Paul. I'm honored. Anybody that can help Paul out as a facilitator, if you want to help me out, help Paul. Just a matter of honor. And then you can let me know if you want to do another session, Paul.
Absolutely, I will.
Okay, God bless.
Thanks for doing this. God bless. And then
God bless now.
We'll speak soon. Bye now. So there you have it, guys. The hijacker come on to share more of his ideas and theories surrounding the Millennial Kingdom. And, you know, again, he's just a guy who was inspired by listening to researchers and video makers like myself. And, you know, he made his own connections in his mind, trying to make sense of the whole thing. And I'm sure you guys have been doing the exact same thing too. So have I. We're all in this together. We're all doing the same thing. And again, he brought some interesting topics to the table, interesting perspectives, which, you know, I myself had not fully considered about, you know, maybe the Gog Magog war is currently happening all the time and it goes on until it's done. Maybe a little season isn't as short as we think it actually is. Who knows? These are no definitive answers here, guys. These are just speculative theories, doing the best we can with what we've got. But he's certainly pieced together an interesting image, hasn't he? And I think that's what we're trying to do here. We're all working together to put together like a 10,000 piece jigsaw puzzle or something like that, you know? And we're comparing pieces to see if they do fit. And I'm having fun doing this, and I hope you guys are having fun too. If you do like what I do and you want to support this, you can always go to my Patreon. $5 a month gets you access to all the extra content on there. There is a behind the scenes after talk on there currently between me and Alpha Talks and Joe from the JC follows JC. Once we did our Parasite presentation, we had a bit of an hour talk for an hour afterwards, and that's on there too. And that's pretty much what you'll get on my Patreon, all the after show behind the scenes talks that don't go onto YouTube. Sometimes I release some to YouTube every now and then when I am short for content or I'm on holiday. Let's say I soft release a few of the videos, but generally speaking, it stays on there. And also, I also post extra book chapters on there as well and little behind the scenes insights. So please consider becoming a patron. $5 is all you need to gain access to the extra content. That's the minimum threshold, but anything else, of course, is appreciated. Thanks to all my YouTube members as well. If I could encourage you to all come over to Patreon, please consider it, because I don't post any extra content for YouTube members. Only patron get extra content, but I do appreciate the support on YouTube members anyway. But please consider coming over to Patreon, guys. That's a little request on my behalf, just for your benefit. You know, your money's wasted going to the YouTube membership. You know, I only get 2/3 of it. YouTube take 1/3, and there's nothing extra on there for you. All the good stuff is over on Patreon. So please consider spending the same amount of money going to Patreon and getting more for your money. Please consider that. But yeah, guys, the book's coming out soon. I'll definitely be dropping some videos about that very soon, drumming up a bit of interest, explaining the process as I'm finishing off the final steps to getting the book for sale on Amazon. Hopefully within the next 2 weeks, give or take. So exciting stuff in the pipeline. I'll be talking to Vinny B again tomorrow. He was on my channel not long ago. He had his own ideas surrounding all of this. He's going to come on and share some of his ideas again. And we had a nice conversation last time. Really nice guy. And he's arranging to get me on the Killer Priest podcast because he knows those guys. I think Killer Priest is an ex-Wu-Tang Clan member of the band. I'm going to be talking to that guy, sharing the Nephilim clowns as well. So that should be interesting. So yeah, guys, lots to look forward to. Lots of things coming forward. Please consider supporting if you haven't already. Thanks for listening, and as always, God bless.